Senior Marine Instructor Daniel Whitmore waited until Commander Emily Carter turned her back to the crowd, and then he drove both hands into her spine and threw her face down into the mud in front of 400 soldiers. He didn't reach to help her. He stood over her, laughed once loud enough for the back row to hear, and said, "That's what happens when they hand out command like party favors." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And what Emily Carter did next left that entire training ground silent for the rest of the day. Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and stay with this story all the way to the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The mud at Camp Blackridge was not ordinary mud. It was Virginia clay churned by 2 weeks of rain and 800 pairs of boots, and it held onto a person like it had opinions about them. Emily Carter went down into it hard elbows first, and the sound she made was not a scream. It was a short, flat grunt, the sound of air leaving a body that had been trained not to waste it. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. 400 soldiers stood in formation on the demonstration field and became all at once a photograph. Nobody coughed, nobody shifted. A young corporal in the second rank had his mouth open and forgot to close it. Somewhere behind the equipment shed a generator hummed, and that hum was suddenly the loudest thing in the state of Virginia. Daniel Whitmore had planned this. Not for weeks. For 11 days. He had run it in his head at night the way he used to run breach sequences, and in every version of it she came up screaming. In every version she turned around with her face red and her voice cracked, and she said something like, "How dare you?" or "That is assault, instructor." And 400 witnesses got to watch the new commander come apart like wet paper. That was the whole plan, not to hurt her, to reveal her. He got something else. Emily Carter pushed herself up onto her hands. She did it slowly. She did not scramble. She did not rush. She did not do the thing everyone does when they are embarrassed, which is to get vertical as fast as possible so the moment can end. She took her time. She got a knee under her. She stood the rest of the way up with her spine straight, and she reached up with 2 fingers and cleared the mud out of her right eye and then out of her left, and she flicked it off her hand onto the ground beside her boot. Then she turned around and looked at Daniel Whitmore. She did not look at him with hatred. That was the part that unsettled the men in the front rank later when they talked about it in the chow hall in low voices. Hatred they understood. Hatred was normal. She looked at him the way a mechanic looks at an engine that has just made a specific noise. Interested, filing it away. "Continue the training," she said. 3 words. Flat, not loud, not soft either, because soft would have been theater. Just the volume required to be heard. Whitmore blinked. "Commander, Continue the training, Instructor Whitmore." And she turned back around, faced the formation, and lifted her chin toward the obstacle line. "First element on my mark," she said. "Second element staged and ready. Medical is at the north end. If you roll an ankle, you say so you do not walk it off because a hidden injury is a lie, and I do not tolerate lies. Go." For a second, nobody moved because the human brain does not process a command from a person covered in mud who has just been assaulted in public. And then the machine of it took over the way it always does, and boots started hitting the ground, and the exercise ran. It ran for 4 more hours. She ran it covered in mud the entire time. She did not go to the barracks. She did not clean her face. She did not mention what had happened, not once, not sideways, not in a joke. She corrected a grip on a rope climb. She caught a private who was cheating a low crawl by lifting his hips and made him do it again while she lay in the dirt beside him at the same height and told him quietly, "The round doesn't care that you're tired. Down." She timed the last element on her own watch and called the numbers out loud. And the whole time the mud dried on her face and cracked, and every single person on that field could see it. That was the part Daniel Whitmore had not accounted for. He had put the mud on her, and she had decided to wear it. Sergeant Marcus Doyle, who had been in the Marine Corps for 19 years and who had exactly 1 goal left in life, which was to retire without getting involved in anything, found himself standing next to Whitmore at the fence line during the 2nd hour. "Dan," he said, "don't." "Dan." "I said don't, Marcus." "You want to tell me what that was?" Whitmore's jaw worked. "It was a demonstration. It was a demonstration. Contact drill. She was demonstrating a stance. I demonstrated why the stance doesn't hold." Doyle looked at him for a long moment. "From behind." Enemy doesn't announce himself. That's cute. Say that again with your hands where I can see them because right now you're shaking. Whitmore looked down at his own hands, and they were in fact shaking. And that made him angrier than anything Emily Carter had said because she had not said anything. She had it coming, he said. She walks in here with a resume nobody can verify and a title somebody handed her because it looks good in a briefing, and I'm supposed to just what? Salute. Yeah, Doyle said. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. 19 years, Marcus. You know what I've buried. I do. Then you know she didn't earn this. Doyle spat into the grass, took his time about it, and then said something that would sit in Whitmore's chest like a swallowed stone for the next several weeks. Dan, I've known you a long time, and in 19 years, I have never once seen you put a man on the ground because he hadn't earned something. Not once. So whatever's happening to you right now, it isn't about earning. Then he walked away. There is a version of Emily Carter's life that fits on a single sheet of paper, and it is not the interesting version, but it is the one that Camp Blackridge had access to, and the one they all thought they understood. 14 years, Navy, officer, combat deployments, a number of them, and then a section where the number stopped being printed and the words got vague, the way they get vague when the details live in a building with no windows. A joint tasking, a recommendation from an admiral nobody had ever met. And then on a Tuesday in March, a Navy commander walking through the gate of a Marine training facility with orders to build something new out of two institutions that had spent 100 years being proud of not being each other. That was the file. And the file was the problem because a file with holes in it is a Rorschach test. People fill the holes with whatever they already believe. By the end of her first week, the fill had happened. It started in the smoke pit where everything at every base in the world starts. It started with a staff sergeant saying, "You seen the new CO," and a corporal saying, "I heard she never even ran a real op." And somebody else who had heard it from somebody else saying, "My buddy at Coronado says she got pulled off a team for a reason." None of it was true. All of it was repeatable. And repeatable beats true every single time in every barracks, in every office, in every family, everywhere on earth. Emily knew. Of course she knew. There is not a commander alive who does not know what is being said about her. The trick is not hearing it. The trick is deciding what to do with your face when you do. On her fourth day, Lieutenant Aaron Reyes, who was 26 and who had made the mistake of being assigned as her aide, came into her office with a jaw so tight it looked painful. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." "You don't need permission. You need a reason." "I've got one." He put a folded piece of paper on her desk. "Somebody's been printing this." She unfolded it. It was a photo of her from an official release, and somebody had written a caption under it, and the caption was not clever, and it was not funny, and it used a word that men use about women when they want to explain her success without ever using the word work. Emily read it. Then she refolded it along the same creases precisely and set it down. "How many copies, ma'am? How many copies, Lieutenant?" That's a simple question. "I've pulled 6. There's probably more." "Then pull more." She slid the paper back across the desk to him. "And then put it in the trash and don't tell me about it again." Reyes stared at her. "Ma'am, with respect, that's evidence." "Of what?" "Of a hostile command climate. Ma'am, you could end somebody's career with that piece of paper." "Yes," Emily said. "I could." "So, Lieutenant?" She leaned back. "Let me ask you something. If I walk into the colonel's office on day 4 with that paper in my hand, what happens?" "They investigate." "And then what happens?" Reyes opened his mouth, closed it. "I'll tell you what happens," she said. "Somebody gets punished, which is fine because they deserve it. And then 800 men on this base learn one thing about their new commander, and only one thing, and it will be the only thing they ever learn, and they will teach it to every man who comes through this gate for the next 20 years. And what they will learn is that the way you deal with Commander Carter is that you don't say anything around her. Not a word, not a joke, nothing. They'll go quiet, Lieutenant. They'll go polite, and polite is a wall, and I cannot train a man through a wall. So we just take it." "No," she stood up. "We outlast it. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole job." Reyes was quiet for a second. Then, because he was 26 and had not learned yet when to stop, he said, "Ma'am, can I say one more thing?" "You're going to anyway." "That's not fair." Emily Carter almost smiled. "Almost." "Lieutenant," she said, "if you came into this line of work looking for fair, somebody owes you a refund." Daniel Whitmore was 51 years old, and he was very good at one thing, and the thing he was good at was making young men into people who could survive a bad night. Nobody at Camp Blackridge disputed this, not even the people who could not stand him. He had a gift for finding the exact place where a 19-year-old was lying to himself and putting his thumb on it. He had been doing it for a long time, and he had gotten men home who should not have come home, and there were mothers in 4 states who had no idea his name existed and who owed him their sons. He also had a photograph in his wallet that he had not looked at in 6 years, and a knee that told him the weather, and a resume with a hole in it too, except his hole was a shape everybody recognized because his hole was a promotion board that had passed on him 3 times. The 3rd time was 14 months ago. He had been told by a colonel who thought he was being kind that the Corps needed him where he was, which is what they say. It is always what they say. And Daniel Whitmore had gone out to his truck and sat in it in the parking lot for 40 minutes without turning the key, and then he had driven home and told his wife it went fine. So when the announcement came down that a joint program was standing up at Blackridge, a real one with real money and a real command billet, and that the billet was going to a Navy officer, and that the Navy officer was a woman he had never heard of, something in Daniel Whitmore that had been holding a very long time finally let go. He would have told you it was about standards. He believed that. That is the part people never understand about men like Daniel Whitmore. He was not lying. He had simply found a story that let him be angry at a stranger instead of at a room he could never get into. The first real collision happened on day 9, 3 days before the mud. It was the classroom, which was worse than the field, because in the field a man can be wrong quietly. Emily was at the front walking through the integration concept, and she got about 11 minutes in when Whitmore's hand went up. "Instructor?" "Ma'am," he said it the way you'd say a word in a language you found distasteful. "Just so I understand, you want my Marines to run a maritime interdiction package. I want your Marines to understand one. Understanding isn't the same as running. Because we don't do that. Not yet. Ma'am, in 19 years, I have never once been in a situation where..." "Instructor Whitmore." She did not raise her voice. "Do you know what the most dangerous sentence in this building is?" He waited. "In 19 years, I've never seen that," she said. "Every man who has ever said that sentence has said it about 6 months before he saw it." Somebody in the 3rd row made a sound that was almost a laugh and killed it in his throat. Whitmore's face went to the color of brick. "So you think we're not ready?" "I think you're excellent," Emily said, which is exactly the problem. Excellent people stop learning first. Nobody who's bad at their job has that luxury. That's a hell of a thing to say to a room full of instructors. It's a hell of a thing to have to say, "Sit down, instructor, you're not being attacked." "I'll stand, ma'am." "Then stand," she said, and went right back to the slide and did not look at him again for 40 minutes. And that was somehow the worst thing she could possibly have done to him. Because what Daniel Whitmore wanted more than anything in the world, more than the promotion, more than the apology, was for her to fight him. She would not fight him. And a man who will not fight you cannot be beaten. He can only be endured. And Daniel Whitmore had been enduring things for 14 months, and he was out of room. The name Jessica Miller matters here, though nobody on that base would have said so at the time. She was 22. She was 5'4". She weighed 131 pounds soaking wet, which she frequently was, and she had come out of a town in eastern Kentucky where the only 3 futures on offer were the mine, the pills, or the recruiter's office, and she had picked the office. She was also on day 11 the worst performer in her element on the rope traverse. Not because she was weak, because she was rushing. She was rushing because she knew what everyone thought when they looked at her, and so she was trying to be done before they could finish thinking it. Whitmore lit her up in front of everybody. "Miller, Miller, what are you doing?" "What is that? Is that a technique? Does that have a name? Somebody get me a book. I want to look up whatever that was." Jessica Miller hung there with her hands going white. "You're going to get somebody killed," Whitmore said. "You know that, not you. Somebody, some kid who's counting on you, and you're going to be tired, and he's going to be dead, and it's going to be because you were in a hurry." She dropped off the rope, landed badly, stayed down on a knee with her head bowed and her whole face burning, and Emily Carter walked over. Everybody expected a defense. Everybody expected the new commander to protect the young woman because that was the story they had already written, and they were leaning forward waiting for the page. "Miller," Emily said, "look at me." Jessica looked up. "He's right. The whole line went quiet. Ma'am, he's right, Emily repeated. That was garbage. You know it was garbage. You rushed the transition and you burned your grip on a rope that doesn't care about your feelings. If that had been a live insert, you'd have gone in the water with 60 pounds on your back. You know what that is? Yes, ma'am. Say it. That's dying, ma'am. That's dying, Emily agreed. So don't do that. She reached down and pulled Jessica Miller up by the forearm, and she did not let go right away. Now, she said quieter, so only the two of them and maybe Whitmore could hear it. Why were you rushing? Jessica's mouth trembled once and locked. No excuse, ma'am. That's not what I asked. I asked why. And Jessica Miller, who had never said this out loud to a single human being in her entire life, heard herself say, because they're watching, ma'am. Emily nodded slowly. Yeah, she said, they are. They're going to keep watching. That's not going to stop, and I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it will. She let go of the forearm. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go back up on that rope, and you're going to go slower than everybody else, and you're going to be the ugliest, slowest, most correct thing on this entire field, and you're going to let them watch every second of it. Because the only thing that has ever shut a room up, Miller, in the history of the world is being right for long enough that arguing gets embarrassing. She stepped back and raised her voice so the entire line got it. The standard applies to everyone, Emily Carter said. Not just the people you expect to succeed. Miller back on the rope. Whitmore time her. And Daniel Whitmore, who had been standing there for the last 90 seconds with his mouth slightly open, said, Ma'am, you're the best hands on this field, Emily said. So use them. Time her. He timed her. It took Jessica Miller a full 19 seconds longer than her last attempt, and it was perfect. And when she came off the rope, 3 people in her element clapped before they could stop themselves, and Whitmore looked at the stopwatch in his hand like it had said something to him. That night, he could not sleep, which is the part of the story that nobody at Camp Blackridge ever knew. Because here is the thing about a man like Daniel Whitmore. He was not confused about what he had just watched. He knew at 11:40 at night, lying in the darkened base housing with his wife asleep beside him, that Emily Carter had just done the thing he had spent 19 years telling himself he did. She had held the line, and she had not humiliated the kid. She had done both. He had always believed you could only pick one. He had built an entire career on you can only pick one. And she had just done both in 90 seconds in front of everybody on day 11. Daniel Whitmore lay in that bed and understood with terrible clarity that Emily Carter might actually be better than him. And that is when he decided to break her. Not because he thought she was a fraud, because he was afraid she wasn't. That is what the mud was. He picked the demonstration because it had cameras, but the cameras were on tripods for the record, not for review, and he knew the angles. He picked the moment because it was the end of the day and everyone was tired, and tired men remember feelings and not sequences. He picked the shove because it was deniable. Contact drill. Enemy doesn't announce himself. And when he did it, when he felt his palms hit her back and felt how little she weighed and heard the sound she made, going down there was a half second, a genuine half second, where Daniel Whitmore felt relief. He had done it. It was out of him. It was over. And then she stood up and cleaned her eyes and said, continue the training. And Daniel Whitmore understood that nothing was over and that he had just made the largest mistake of his adult life and that he was going to have to live inside it. The colonel called her in at 1900. Colonel Ray Bishop was 62, had a bad back, and had been running Camp Blackridge for 4 years, and his entire management philosophy could be summarized as, please not this year. He had her sit. She was still in the utilities. The mud had gone gray and was flaking onto his floor, and neither of them mentioned it. You want to tell me what happened on my field today? A training evolution, sir. Emily. Sir. Bishop rubbed his face with both hands. I've had 4 separate people find a reason to walk past my door in the last 2 hours. 4. One of them was a Lance Corporal who I am fairly sure has never voluntarily approached this building in his life. Nobody said anything because nobody's going to say anything, but they walked past. You know what that means. It means they want you to already know, Emily said. It means they want me to already know, Bishop said. So, do I know? Emily was quiet for a moment. Sir, may I ask you a question first? Go. If I file, what happens to the program? Bishop's eyes closed. Don't do that. I'm asking honestly. You know what happens, it goes on hold. Investigation 30 days minimum, probably 90. Two of your instructors get pulled for statements. Legal's in here twice a week. Every man in that formation gets interviewed about what he saw, and half of them will discover they were looking at their boots. He opened his eyes. And the program dies. Not officially. Officially, it'll be paused. It'll be paused for 18 months, and then it'll be quietly restructured, and then it'll be somebody's line item in a budget nobody reads. That's what I thought, Emily said. That is not a reason to eat it, Commander. Do you hear me? That is a reason for me to be furious. It is not a reason for you to eat it. That's the oldest trap there is. Don't make waves think of the mission. I have watched that sentence and more good careers than combat has. I know, sir. Then don't. Emily looked at him steadily. Sir, she said, I'm not eating it. Bishop went still. Say that again. I said I'm not eating it. I'm just not spending it yet. Emily. Sir, if I file, Daniel Whitmore becomes a victim. She said it flatly the way you'd read off coordinates. That's what happens. You know it, and I know it. 19 years, 3 deployments, a wall of commendations, and a female Navy commander ends him on day 12 with paperwork. That's the story. That's the only story. It'll be all over this base before the ink's dry, and it'll follow me to every command I ever hold. And every man who ever wondered whether I was real will have his answer, and his answer will be no. That's not justice, Bostic. No, sir, Emily said. That's the weather. Bishop stared at her for a long moment. So what are you going to do? And Emily Carter said, Sir, I'd like to request a fully documented close combat evaluation. Standard curriculum, all senior staff present, every camera on, both instructors and command element observing on the record with the footage retained. Bishop leaned back very slowly in his chair, and it creaked, and he did not take his eyes off her. Against who, he said, and it was not a question. You know against who. Emily. Standard curriculum, sir. Nothing outside the syllabus. Nothing that isn't already scheduled to happen to every man on this base. Do not do this. It's a scheduled evolution, sir. Do not. Bishop stopped. Started again. Commander, listen to me. If you get hurt, if you get so much as a bloody nose, everything they've said about you for 12 days becomes true. Forever. There's no appeal. You understand that you are betting the entire thing on one afternoon. Yes, sir. He's got 60 pounds on you. 62, sir. Bishop blinked. You looked it up. I looked everything up, Emily said. And something in the way she said it made the colonel's stomach go cold because it was not the voice of a woman who was hoping. It was the voice of a woman reading a number off a page. You've been planning this, he said. That's when Emily Carter stood up. The dried clay cracked off her shoulder and fell on his floor, and she did not apologize for it. Sir, she said, he's been watching me for 12 days. She walked to the door and put her hand on it. He never once considered that I was watching him back. Day 13 began at 0440, and Daniel Whitmore was already awake because he had not really slept since the mud. He lay there in the dark doing the thing that men like him do when a thing has gone wrong, which is to rebuild it. He rebuilt the shove 11 different ways. In one of them, he did not do it at all. In one of them, she screamed, and it went the way he planned, and he woke up almost happy for a second and a half before the real memory came back and put its boot on his chest. At 0510, his wife rolled over and said without opening her eyes, You're doing it again. Doing what? Lying there like a corpse with your eyes open. You did it after Fallujah. You did it after the board. She reached over and put her hand flat on his chest. What did you do, Dan? And Daniel Whitmore, 19 years a Marine decorated, feared, respected, lay in his own bed in base housing and said nothing. Go back to sleep. That was the first lie of day 13. There would be others. At 0600, Emily Carter was already on the field. She was there before the duty NCO. She was there before the coffee. She ran the perimeter road twice 4 miles in a pace that would have embarrassed most of the men still asleep in the barracks. And then she stood at the head of the demonstration field in clean utilities with her hands behind her back and watched 800 people discover that she had not gone anywhere. That was the entire message, and everybody received it. Lieutenant Reyes found her at 0640 with a clipboard and a face like a thundercloud. Ma'am, Lieutenant, permission to be furious. Denied. Give me the roster. He gave her the roster. She read it. He stood there vibrating. Ma'am, there were 400 witnesses. There were 400 people, Emily said. That's not the same thing. Witnesses are people who are willing to say what they saw. You want to know how many of those we have? I could get you 30 by lunch. You could get me 30 men who would say it in this room to you with the door shut, Emily said. You'd get 4 who'd say it on a sworn statement. And by the time illegal got done, you'd get 1. And that one would be you, and you'd never get another job in this corps, and I'd have spent a 26-year-old lieutenant to buy a reprimand. She handed the clipboard back. That's a bad trade, Reyes. I don't make bad trades. So he just gets it. Nobody just gets anything, Emily said. Second element's late. Go find out why. He went, but he stopped at the edge of the field and looked back at her, and what he saw was a woman standing perfectly still with her chin up while 300 people pretended not to stare at her, and something in Aaron Reyes hardened right there and did not soften again for a long time. By 0800, the base had already decided what had happened, and it had decided 3 different things at once. In the motor pool, it was that Whitmore had lost his mind and was finished done walking dead, just waiting on the paperwork. In the barracks, it was that Carter had frozen, that she had gone down and stayed down inside herself, that continue the training was not strength but shock. And in the smoke pit outside Building 4, where the worst of it always lives, Staff Sergeant Kyle Brandt was holding court. I'm just saying what I heard, Brandt said. You always are, somebody said. Guy at Coronado, straight from him. There's a reason her file's got a hole in it, and it ain't classified, it's cleaned. Brandt tapped Ash off. You don't get a hole like that from doing good work. You get a hole like that from somebody making a problem go away. That's a hell of a thing to say. It's a hell of a thing to be true. Brandt smiled with half his mouth. Look, I got nothing against her. I got something against being lied to. And that was the genius of it. And Kyle Brandt was not a stupid man, whatever else he was. He never said a single thing that could be repeated back to him. He said, I heard. He said, I'm just asking. He said, I got nothing against her, which is a sentence that has never once in the history of the English language been followed by anything good. Sergeant Marcus Doyle was standing 8 feet away with a cup of coffee listening, and he did not say anything either, and he would think about that later in the dark for a long time. At 0920, Emily Carter did something nobody expected. She ran the course. Not as a demonstration, not with an announcement. She just walked over to the start line of the combined obstacle evolution, the one everybody called the meat grinder, the one that had a 40% first attempt failure rate among operators with a decade in. And she said to the timer, a 19-year-old private named Okafor, who nearly swallowed his own tongue, start me. Ma'am, start me private. Ma'am, I'm supposed to. Okafor. Yes, ma'am. On your mark. Go. She went. Here is what 400 people saw over the next several minutes, though most of them only caught pieces because the word spread across that base faster than any word had ever spread across it. And by the halfway point, there were men running from the chow hall with trays still in their hands. They saw a 41-year-old Navy commander go up a 20-foot rope without her legs. They saw her hit the low crawl and not lift her hips, not once, not even at the end, where everybody lifts their hips. They saw her come to the wall, the 8-footer that broke people, and they saw her not jump at it because jumping at it is what tired people do. They saw her walk up to it, set her hands, and go over it in one motion like the wall was a suggestion. And they saw her face the entire time, and her face did not change. That was the thing that got them, not the speed. The face, there was nothing on it, no effort, no drama, no performance. It was the face of somebody doing paperwork. Private Okafor called the time out loud because he did not know what else to do with it, and his voice cracked in the middle. 451, ma'am. Nobody said anything. Because the standing record on that course held by a Marine gunnery sergeant who had since gone to Force Recon and who was spoken about in that place the way other places speak about saints was 439. She had missed it by 12 seconds. At 41, in front of everybody. Cold with no warm-up on 12 minutes notice on the morning after a man had put her face in the dirt. Somebody in the back of the crowd said quietly, "You have got to be kidding me." Emily Carter walked back to the start line, took her cover off, put it back on and said, "Private Okafor, log it. Whole thing goes into the book, including the miss." She turned to the crowd. 12 seconds. That's the gap between me and the man who holds his course. 12 seconds is not talent. 12 seconds is repetition. Anybody in this formation who is telling himself the difference between him and the best is talent. You're excused from the difference. And you'll stay excused, and you'll die excused. She walked off. Kyle Brandt watched her go and said to nobody, "She practiced it. Guaranteed. She's been running that thing at night." And a corporal beside him said something that Brandt did not expect and that he did not forgive. "So what if she did, Staff Sergeant?" At 1100, Colonel Bishop's phone rang, and it was not a call he wanted. "Ray, it's Hal." Bishop closed his eyes. Colonel Hal Vance sat 2 echelons up and had never in 15 years called Ray Bishop about anything good. "Hal, I hear you got some excitement. I got a training base." "Ray, say what you're calling to say, Hal." There was a pause on the line, and the pause was the whole conversation, and both men knew it. "There's talk," Vance said. "Talk gets to people. People make calls. Somebody upstairs is very invested in this joint program because somebody upstairs has his name on it. If it turns into a story, it doesn't turn into a story about your instructor. It turns into a story about the program. And then it's not a program, it's a headline, and nobody funds a headline. So you want me to bury it. I want you to tell me there's nothing to bury." Bishop looked at the dried gray flakes of Virginia clay that were still on his floor because he had told the cleaning detail to leave them. "There's nothing to bury," he said. "Good man." Bishop hung up and sat there for a full minute, and then he said out loud to an empty office, "God forgive me." Then he picked the phone back up and called the schedule shop and said the close combat evaluation Commander Carter requested. Day 16. Put it on the calendar. Yes, the calendar. The real one. The one people read. If he could not defend her one way, he was going to defend her the other way, which was to make it impossible for anyone to pretend it had not happened. At 11:40, the schedule went up, and Camp Blackridge lost its mind. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. A command element close combat evaluation senior staff. Mandatory full documentation, both participants listed by name. Carter E. Commander USN Whitmore, D. Senior Instructor USMC. It was on the wall. In print, where everyone could see it. Whitmore saw it at 11:52. He stood in front of that board for a long time. Long enough that men started going the other way around the building rather than walk past him. Doyle found him there. "Dan, you see this?" "I see it." "She put me on a board." Whitmore's voice was very quiet. "She put my name on a board, Marcus. She put your name on a training schedule. Don't do that." Whitmore turned around, and Doyle actually took half a step back because Whitmore's eyes were red and his hands were open at his sides. "Don't play word games with me. You know what this is." "Yeah," Doyle said. "It's her giving you the one thing you've been screaming for since the day she got here." "What?" "A fight." Doyle shrugged. "You wanted her to fight you. She wouldn't. So you shoved her in front of 400 people to make her, and it didn't work, so now she's giving it to you anyway. On the schedule, in front of everybody, on the record." He let that sit. "Congratulations, Dan, you won. That's what winning looks like." Whitmore said, "Get away from me." "Sure." "Marcus." Doyle stopped. Whitmore stood there with his jaw working, and he could not get the words out, and finally what came out was, "Why isn't she filing?" And Doyle, who had been in the Corps for 19 years and had exactly one goal left, which was to retire without getting involved in anything, gave up on that goal right there in the hallway. "Because she's not trying to beat you, you idiot," he said. "She's trying to keep you." At 1300, Emily Carter was in the equipment cage with a notebook. Not a computer. A notebook, the small, green kind, the kind everybody carried and nobody thought about, and she had it open and she was writing, and what she was writing was this: left foot forward. Always. Even standing still. Even in the chow line. Loads the right hip before step. Half beat, consistent, right knee. Old. He favors it on stairs going down, not up. Going down means the joint, not the muscle. When he's angry, he squares. When he's confident, he blades. He telegraphs the right hand by dropping the left shoulder 2 inches. Every time. 19 years and nobody ever corrected him because nobody ever beat him, so nobody ever had a reason to. She had 11 pages of it. Reyes came in and saw the notebook and did not understand what he was looking at. Ma'am, what is that? Homework. He looked closer. He read 3 lines and his face changed. Ma'am, how long have you? Since day 2. Day 2, ma'am. On day 2, he hadn't done anything yet. Emily closed the notebook. Lieutenant, she said, on day 2, he stood in the back of my brief with his arms crossed and his weight on his back foot, and he did not write a single word down. That's a man who has already decided. I don't have to wait for a man like that to do something. I just have to be ready for when he does. Reyes swallowed. He struggled. Ma'am, that's kind of cold. That's the job, Emily said. Now, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to be smart about it. Ma'am, there's a story going around about Coronado, about my file. Ma'am, I've heard it. It's garbage. It's Reyes. She looked up. I don't care if it's garbage. Garbage floats. I want to know who threw it in the water. Reyes went still. You think it's Whitmore? No, Emily said, and that was the first surprise. I don't. Ma'am, Daniel Whitmore put his hands on me in front of 400 people at the end of a duty day, with cameras on tripods and no plan for what came after. That's not a man running an operation, Lieutenant. That's a man having one. She tapped the notebook. Whitmore is loud. This rumor is quiet. Loud and quiet don't come from the same throat. Find me the throat. At 14:20, Jessica Miller nearly quit. Nobody knew about it except one person, and that is the only reason it did not happen. She was in the head with the door locked and her hands on the sink, and she was doing the arithmetic that everybody in that position eventually does, which is the arithmetic of how many days are left and whether the number is survivable. Her hands hurt. Her hands hurt in a way that was new, a deep pulsing thing in the meat of the palms from 19 extra seconds on a rope in front of the entire base. She had gone back up. She had done it slow and ugly and correct. 3 people had clapped. And then that night, somebody had written something on the whiteboard outside her squad bay, and somebody else had erased it before she saw it, and the erasing was almost worse because now she got to imagine it forever. She was 22. She was from a town with 3 futures. She had picked the office, and she was standing in a bathroom at 14:20 on day 13, deciding whether to be a person who quit. Somebody knocked. Occupied. Miller. She knew the voice and her stomach dropped out of her. Ma'am, Open the door, Miller. She opened the door. Emily Carter looked at her for about 2 seconds, and she did not say, "Are you okay?" And she did not say, "I know it's hard." And she did not say any of the things that would have finished Jessica Miller off right there. She said, "Show me your hands." Jessica held them out. They were a mess. Emily took them, turned them over, pressed a thumb into the base of the left palm, and Jessica hissed. "Yeah," Emily said. "That's a rope burn under a callus. That's the worst kind because you can't see it, so nobody believes it. Medical 20 minutes tell them I sent you, and then you're off grip work for 48 hours. Ma'am, I don't want special. Miller, if I let you tear your hands open because you're scared of what a 180-pound staff sergeant thinks of you, then I'm not a commander. I'm a coward with rank." Emily let go of her hands. 20 minutes. Medical. Jessica stood there, and then because she was 22 and because her hands hurt, and because somebody had finally touched them, she said the thing she should not have said. "Ma'am, did it hurt?" Emily's head came up. "Did what hurt?" "Yesterday. When he..." Jessica's voice failed and restarted. "Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's saying you didn't feel it. Like it didn't touch you. Like you're not..." She stopped. "Like I'm not what?" "Like you're not a person, ma'am," Jessica Miller said. There was a silence in that hallway that lasted maybe 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds, Emily Carter did a thing she had done perhaps 6 times in 14 years, which was to tell the truth on purpose. "It hurt," she said. Jessica blinked. "It hurt like hell," Emily said. "I've got a bruise on my back the size of a dinner plate, and I couldn't lift my left arm above my shoulder until about 10 o'clock last night. And when I hit that dirt Miller for about half a second, I wanted to get up and take his throat out with my hands, and I could have, and part of me is still angry that I didn't." Jessica Miller stared at her. "Then why didn't you, ma'am?" "Because he wanted me to," Emily said. And Miller listened to me carefully because this is the only real thing I know. The single most powerful thing you will ever have in your entire career is the ability to not give a man the reaction he built his whole plan around. That's it. That's the secret. There isn't another one. She stepped back. 20 minutes. Medical. Go. Jessica went. And she did not quit then or ever. And 11 years later, she would tell that story to a room full of lieutenants, and she would still get through it without her voice breaking, but only barely. At 1600, Reyes found the throat. It took him 3 hours, and it took him lying to 2 people, and it took him buying a corporal named Osi, a very large amount of chicken, and what he came back with made his hands cold. Ma'am, talk. It's Brandt, Staff Sergeant Kyle Brandt. Emily's pen stopped. Whitmore's man. Yes, ma'am. Been under him 4 years. And ma'am, it's not just the Coronado thing, it's everything, the photo caption, the whiteboard, the thing in the smoke pit about your file being cleaned. It's all one guy, and he's been running it since before you got here. Before? Ma'am, Osi says Brandt was talking about you in February. Reyes swallowed. Your orders didn't publish until the first week of March. Emily set the pen down. Say that again. He knew you were coming, a month early, ma'am, and he was already telling people what you were. And Emily Carter sat back in her chair, and for the first time in 13 days, something moved across her face that Aaron Reyes did not recognize. And it took him a while to understand what it was. It was not anger, it was recognition. Lieutenant, she said slowly, pull Brandt's record. Ma'am, I already... Pull his family. Reyes stopped. Ma'am. His family, Lieutenant. Next of kin. Emergency contacts. Everything on the sheet. Emily's voice had gone somewhere very flat. And then pull the casualty roster for this base going back 8 years. Reyes stood there with his mouth open. Ma'am, I don't understand. Neither do I yet, Emily said. Go. At 17:15, Daniel Whitmore did something he had not done in 6 years. He went out to his truck. He sat in it. He did not turn the key. And he took his wallet out of his back pocket, and he opened it, and he took the photograph out from behind his license, where it had been sitting so long that the edges had gone soft as cloth. It was a kid, 23 maybe, grinning, filthy, sunburned across the nose, holding a helmet under one arm, and giving the camera the finger with the other hand. Daniel Whitmore looked at that photograph for 11 minutes. Then he put it back, and he put the wallet back, and he turned the key, and he drove home. And when his wife asked how his day was, he said, fine. That was the second lie of day 13. At 0600 on day 14, Emily Carter called an all hands. Everybody expected it to be about the shove. Everybody. 800 people came into that hangar wound so tight you could have played them like a guitar. And they sat down, and Whitmore stood in the back with his arms crossed and his weight on his back foot, and he waited for the axe. Emily Carter walked to the front and said, the program's failing. The whole hangar went sideways. Not the people, she said. The program. Look at the numbers. 41% first attempt failure on integrated evolutions. 41. That's not a personnel problem. That's a design problem, and the design is mine, so the problem is mine. I built this wrong. Nobody breathed. Here's what I got wrong, she said. I built it for the man who's already good. Every element in this syllabus rewards the guy who walks in with the skill. That's a program that produces nothing. That's a filter, not a school. Any idiot can build a filter. You put a wall up and see who climbs it, and then you take credit for the climbers. She looked out over 800 faces. I'm rebuilding it. It'll be harder. It'll be harder for the good ones, especially because the good ones are going to have to do things they're bad at in front of people who watched them be excellent yesterday, and that is the single most uncomfortable thing a competent human being can be asked to do. Somebody's chair creaked. And I need instructors who can teach that, Emily said, not instructors who can break people. Anybody can break a person. It takes about 4 minutes and no talent at all. I need people who can take a man who is humiliated and put him back on the rope. That's a rare skill. There are maybe 6 people on this base who have it. And then she said it. Instructor Whitmore is one of them. The entire hangar turned around and looked at the back. Daniel Whitmore stood there with his arms crossed and his face going white, and then red, and then something worse than either. Instructor Whitmore has the best hands on this installation, Emily Carter said. He's put more men through the worst nights of their lives and gotten them out the other side than anybody wearing a uniform in this building. That's not flattery. It's the record, and the record doesn't care how I feel. She turned back to the front. He'll be running the redesign with me, effective today. She walked off the stage. And 800 people sat there in total silence trying to understand what had just happened. And Kyle Brandt in the fourth row said under his breath, "What the hell is she doing?" He was not the only one asking. Whitmore caught her in the corridor outside. He was not calm. He got in front of her and he was breathing hard, and his voice came out wrong. "What was that?" "That was a staff assignment." "Don't." He put his hand on the wall, not blocking her exactly, but not blocking her. "Don't you dare do that to me." Emily looked at his hand on the wall. He took it down. "Ma'am," he said, and it cost him something. "What was that?" "You want the honest answer or the polite one?" "Honest." "You're the best I've got, and I need you," Emily said. "That's the whole thing. There's no move under it. I know you want there to be because a move you could fight and this you can't. You're using me." "Yes," Emily said. "That's what a command is, instructor. It's using people. The only question is whether you use them for something worth doing." Whitmore's mouth opened, closed. "You put my name on a board," he said. "Day 16. That's a scheduled evolution. Ma'am, I put you in the dirt in front of 400 people, and 2 days later you put me in charge of the redesign and put my name on a combat eval, and you want me to believe there's no move under it." His voice cracked and he hated it. "What is this? What are you doing to me?" And Emily Carter said very quietly, "Instructor, I'm not doing anything to you. That's what you can't stand." She walked past him. He did not follow. At 1000 on day 14, Reyes came back with the casualty roster, and he was not okay. "Ma'am, sit." "Ma'am, I'd rather stand." "Sit, Aaron." He sat. That was the first time she had used his first name, and it scared him more than anything else in the whole 13 days. "Brandt's family," he said. "Kyle Brandt has a younger brother. Had." Reyes put the sheet on the desk. "Sergeant Tyler Brandt, killed in action 6 years ago in March." Emily did not touch the sheet. "Where?" she said. "Ma'am, it's not on the sheet." "That's the thing. It says Overseas Contingency Operation. No unit, no location, no nothing. It's a hole." Reyes looked up at her. "Ma'am, it's the same kind of hole that's in your file." The office was very quiet. "And there's one more thing." Reyes' voice had gone thin. "Tyler Brandt went through this base in his second year. His instructor of record was Daniel Whitmore. And ma'am, when I pulled the training file, there's a personal note in it, which nobody does. Nobody puts a personal note in a training file, and the note is Whitmore's, and it says, he stopped. "Read it." "Ma'am." "Read it, Lieutenant." Reyes read it. "Best I ever had, if I'd had a son." Emily Carter closed her eyes. And Aaron Reyes, 26 years old, watched his commander sit absolutely still for 11 seconds, with her eyes closed and then opened them, and the thing he saw in them was not something he had a word for and would not have a word for until he was much older. "Ma'am," he said. "Ma'am, were you there?" "Get out, Lieutenant." "Ma'am." "Aaron." Her voice did not rise. It did the other thing, the thing that is so much worse. "Get out." He got out. At 1300 on day 15, with the evaluation 22 hours away, Kyle Brandt made his move, and it was the smartest thing he ever did, and the worst. He went to see Whitmore. "Boss?" "Brandt, you got a minute?" Whitmore was at a desk covered in the redesign, the thing she had put on him, the syllabus he had spent 19 years worth of instinct on and could not stop working, and that was the trap, and he knew it was the trap, and he could not stop. "Make it fast. Tomorrow." Brandt sat down without being asked. "You know what tomorrow is. It's a training evolution." "Boss," Brandt leaned in. "It's her ending you in front of the whole base with a smile on her face and calling it curriculum. That's what it is. And you're going to let her." Whitmore did not look up. "Say your piece." "I'm saying you go in there and you handle it," Brandt said. "You're 60 pounds heavier. You've got 19 years. She's got a resume nobody's ever seen. You put her down in 10 seconds in front of every camera on this base, and this whole thing is over. The program, the redesign, all of it. Nobody's going to follow a commander who got folded up by her own instructor on video." And Daniel Whitmore stopped writing. He put the pen down and he looked at Kyle Brandt for the first time in the conversation, and he looked at him for a long time. "Kyle," he said, How long you been telling people about her file? Brandt's face did not move, but something behind it did. Boss, well, February, Whitmore said. You were talking about her in February. Her orders published in March. I don't know what you... Don't. Whitmore's voice was very tired. Don't do that. Not with me. 19 years don't do that. Brandt sat back. And then he smiled, and it was not a nice smile, and it was the smile of a man who had been waiting a long time to say a thing. You want to know how I knew, he said. I knew because I have been reading every list, every roster, every published bill that comes out of that community for 6 years, boss. 6 years. Because somewhere on one of those lists is the name of the person who was in the room when my brother died. And one day I am going to see that name, and when I see it, I am going to know it. The office had gone completely still. And in February, Kyle Brandt said, I saw it. Whitmore did not move. Say the name, he said. You know the name. Say it. And Kyle Brandt said, Carter. Daniel Whitmore sat there with his hand still on the pen and the redesign in front of him, and 19 years behind him, and he felt the whole floor of his life tilt about 4 degrees, and he understood all at once with total clarity that he had not been angry at Emily Carter for taking a job. He had been angry at her for 11 days for a reason nobody had ever told him. He had been handed a story in February by a man he trusted, and he had never once asked where the story came from, and he had put his hands on a woman's back in front of 400 people because of it. Get out, Whitmore said. Boss. Get out of my office, Staff Sergeant. Brandt stood. At the door, he turned around. You'll do it, he said. Tomorrow, you'll do it. Because if you don't, then everything you told yourself for 11 days was just you being a bully, and boss, I know you. You'd rather break her spine than find that out. He closed the door, and Daniel Whitmore sat alone in that office for 2 hours and 20 minutes and did not write a single word. At 1800 on day 15, Bishop called Emily in for the last time before it happened. Sit. I'll stand, sir. Emily, sit down before I have a heart attack. She sat. Bishop looked at her across the desk and he looked old. Vance called again, he said, twice. There's pressure. There's the kind of pressure where nobody says the thing, they just keep saying the other things until you understand. He rubbed his eyes. I want you to know that I'm not going to move it. It's on the calendar. It stays on the calendar. If it costs me my last year, it costs me my last year. And honestly, Emily, at this point, I'd almost prefer it. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thanking me is how I know you've already accepted something I haven't. Bishop leaned forward. Talk to me, off of the record. Nothing in this room. Emily was quiet. Sir, she said, did you know Tyler Brandt? Bishop went absolutely white. It happened so fast that Emily actually leaned forward. Sir. Where did you get that name? Bishop said. Sir, did you know him, Emily? Bishop's voice had gone strange. Where did you get that name? His brother is on this base, Emily said. He's been running a whisper campaign about me since February, and his instructor of record was Daniel Whitmore, and Whitmore wrote in his training file that if he'd had a son, and sir, I need you to tell me right now because I am walking into a room with that man in 15 hours. Bishop sat back very slowly. He doesn't know, he said. Sir, Whitmore doesn't know. He's never known. 6 years. He requested the packet 4 times. 4 times Emily, and 4 times it came back denied because the whole thing sits behind a door that a senior instructor at a training command does not get to walk through. Bishop's hands were flat on the desk and they were not steady. He buried that boy without ever being told what happened to him. Do you understand what that does to a man? Do you understand what it does to a man like that? He has spent 6 years with a hole in his chest shaped exactly like a story nobody would tell him. Sir. And now his own staff sergeant has handed him one. Bishop looked up. And you're the villain in him. Emily said nothing. Emily, Bishop's voice dropped. Were you there? And Emily Carter looked at the colonel of Camp Blackridge and said, Sir, I'd like to be excused. Emily. Sir, respectfully, I'd like to be excused. She stood. Commander. Bishop stood too and he was shaking. If you were there and you walk into that room tomorrow and he finds out in the middle of it, then that is not an evaluation. That is not curriculum. That is a man with 60 pounds on you and 6 years of grief finding out on camera. And Emily, I have seen what that does. I have seen it. And there is not a technique in the world that stops it. Emily Carter stood at the door of his office with her hand on the frame. "Sir," she said, "may I tell you what I think of, please? I think for 6 years, everyone that man trusted made a decision about what he could handle," she said. "The board, the system, the packet that came back denied 4 times. Every one of them looked at Daniel Whitmore and decided he couldn't take it. And so they gave him nothing, and a nothing is not a nothing, sir. A nothing is a space, and somebody always fills it." "Emily, Brant filled it," she said, "because nobody else would." Bishop stared at her. "So you're going to fill it," he said, "tomorrow in front of the whole base." "No, sir," Emily said. "Tomorrow I'm going to do exactly what's on the schedule. Standard curriculum, nothing outside the syllabus." She looked back at him. "But sir, when it's done, he's going to be listening. And that's the only thing I've needed for 15 days, not for him to lose, for him to listen." She left. Bishop stood in his office in the dark for a long time. At 22:40 on the night before Aaron Reyes came to her quarters because he could not help himself, and he knocked, and she opened the door. "Ma'am, I know I'm out of line." "You are?" "I don't care." "Then come in." He came in. The room was almost empty. A rack of Foot Locker, 1 chair. On the small desk there was the green notebook closed, and beside it a manila folder, and the folder was thin and old, and the corner of it was worn through. Reyes looked at it and could not stop looking at it. "Ma'am," he said, "tomorrow, are you going to be okay?" "That's not a useful question, Lieutenant." "It's the only one I've got, ma'am." Emily almost smiled. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "Aaron," she said, "let me tell you the thing nobody tells you. Everybody thinks the hard part is the fight. It isn't. The fight is 4 seconds. I've had 4 seconds 100 times, and 4 seconds is easy because in 4 seconds, there's nothing to decide. Your body just does what you trained it to do." She looked at the folder. "The hard part is the 15 days before. The hard part is walking around a base where 800 people have already decided what you are and getting up at 04:30 anyway, and running the road anyway, and correcting a grip on a rope anyway, and doing it with nothing on your face when every single hour of it, something in you is screaming." Reyes said quietly. "Ma'am, is something screaming?" "Lieutenant," Emily Carter said. "It hasn't stopped since March." He didn't know what to say, so he said, "Ma'am, what's in the folder?" And Emily Carter looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached over and turned it around and slid it 3 inches across the desk toward him and said, "You've earned it. Open it." Reyes opened the folder. There was 1 page. It was a personnel photograph, 6 years old, of a kid, 23 maybe, grinning, filthy, sunburned across the nose. And the name typed beneath it was Brant Tyler A., Sergeant USMC. And underneath that, in handwriting in blue ink, in a hand that was clearly hers, there were 4 words that Aaron Reyes read 3 times before he understood them, and when he understood them, he stopped breathing. The 4 words were, "He didn't die alone." Aaron Reyes read the 4 words a 3rd time, and then he set the folder down on the desk very carefully, the way a man sets down something that might be live. "Ma'am, don't. Ma'am, you were there. Lieutenant, you were there." His voice had gone somewhere thin and young. 6 years ago, you were in the room. That's the hole in your file. That's the hole in his file. It's the same hole. It's 1 hole, ma'am. It's 1 hole with 2 names on it, and nobody's allowed to say it out loud. Emily Carter reached over and closed the folder. "Aaron," she said, "look at me." He looked at her. "You have never seen that page," she said. "You did not open that folder. You were never in this room. And in about 9 hours, when Kyle Brant does whatever Kyle Brant is going to do, you are going to stand there with your hands behind your back and your mouth shut, and you are going to let it happen." "Ma'am, say it. That's insane, ma'am." "Probably." She stood up. "Do it anyway." Reyes stood too. He was shaking a little, and he did not know why, and later he would understand that it was because he had just been told a secret that was too big for him, and there was no putting it back. "Ma'am, permission to ask 1 question." 1. "Why did you show me?" Emily Carter thought about that for a second longer than he expected. "Because tomorrow there's going to be exactly 1 person in that building who knows what's actually happening," she said. "And it can't be me. I'm going to be busy." She opened the door. "Go to bed, Lieutenant." He went. He did not go to bed. He sat on the edge of his rack until 0200, with his boots still on, staring at a wall doing arithmetic that had no answer in it. At 0014, Emily Carter lay in the dark with her eyes open and her back throbbing where the bruise was, and she did the thing she had not let herself do in 15 days, which was to remember. She did not remember the noise. That surprised people when she told the two men in the windowless building afterward. Everybody assumes it's the noise. It isn't. It's the quiet parts. It's a 23-year-old kid with a sunburn across his nose, looking up at her with total, absolute, unembarrassed trust, because she was the officer, and officers know what to do. And she had known what to do. That was the thing. She had known exactly what to do, and she had done it correctly in the right order, at the right speed, and he had died anyway in 11 minutes holding her sleeve. He'd asked her one question at minute 9. Just one. And she had answered it, and the answer had been a lie. And it was the only lie she had ever been proud of in her entire life. She'd carried the shape of that lie for 6 years. And in about 11 hours, a man was going to try to break her spine on camera because of it. Emily Carter closed her eyes and did not sleep. At 0240, Daniel Whitmore was in his truck in his own driveway with the engine off. He had gotten up at 0150 because lying there had become a physical problem. He had walked out through his own kitchen in the dark and taken the keys off the hook and gone out and sat in the driver's seat of a truck that was not going anywhere. And he was aware the exact thing he had done 14 months ago after the board. The wallet was in his hand. He had not opened it. The porch light came on. His wife came out in a bathrobe and stood there for a second, and then she came down the steps and opened the passenger door and got in and shut it, and she did not say anything for a while. Karen. Nope. Karen, go inside. Daniel. She said his whole name, which she had done maybe 6 times in 24 years, and every one of them had been serious. You've been out here 3 nights. I'm fine. You're sitting in a parked truck at 3 in the morning holding your wallet. She let that sit. Honey, I've been married to you since you were 27. I know what's in that wallet. You want to tell me why it's out? Whitmore's jaw worked. There's a woman on the base, he said. Okay, that's not... He stopped, started over. There's a commander, Navy, came in March, and I've spent 2 weeks convinced she's a fraud, and I've been telling everybody who'd stand still, and 3 days ago I put my hands on her back in front of 400 Marines and put her face in the mud. Karen Whitmore did not say anything. Say something. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to throw up, she said. Karen, you put your hands on a woman. On an officer. Daniel Whitmore. Her voice did not rise, and that was worse. Do not do that. Do not stand in front of me and do the thing you do where you pick the word that lets you sleep. You put your hands on a person from behind who was not looking at you. He put his head against the steering wheel. Yeah, he said. What did she do? Nothing. What? She got up. His voice went. She got up and she wiped her face and she said, continue the training. And she ran that field for 4 more hours covered in it. Karen, 4 more hours, and she never mentioned it. Not once, not to me, not to Bishop, not to anybody. Nobody's filed anything. There's no investigation. Nothing's happened. And that's killing you. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to me, Daniel Whitmore said, and then heard himself say it and put both hands over his face. Karen sat with him for a minute. Dan, she said finally, why'd you do it? Because she didn't earn it. Try again. Because the program's a joke and she's... Try again. Because Kyle told me something. It came out of him like a shot and the cab of the truck rang with it. He was breathing hard. Because Kyle told me something in February and I never asked where he got it, and I have been carrying it around for 5 months like it's a fact. And yesterday he told me the rest of it, and Karen... He stopped. What's the rest of it? He says she was there, Whitmore said, when Tyler died. The porch light clicked off on its timer, and neither of them noticed. Oh, honey, Karen said. 6 years. His hands were fists on the wheel. 6 years I've been writing letters to a building. 4 packets. 4. All denied. Not releasable at this level. Not releasable. To me. I put that kid through this course. I taught him how to tie the knot that was on his kit when he died, and I am not cleared to know what happened in the last 11 minutes of his life. He was shaking, and a staff sergeant walks into my office and hands me a name, and I grabbed it, Karen. I grabbed it with both hands. Because it was something. Because 6 years of nothing will make a man take anything. Dan. And tomorrow I'm on a schedule with her. His voice dropped. Combat eval, cameras, whole base. She put it up herself. Karen Whitmore turned in the seat and looked at her husband for a long moment. Do you want to know what I think? No. I'm going to tell you anyway. She reached over and took the wallet out of his hand and put it on the dash. I think you already know she's not a fraud. I think you've known since about the first week because you're a lot of things, but you have never once in your life been wrong about who's good. And I think that's exactly why you did it. Whitmore didn't move. And I think tomorrow, Karen said, you have to decide whether you're the man who taught that boy how to tie a knot or the man who's been sitting in this truck for 3 nights. She got out. At the door, she stopped and turned around. Dan, one more thing. Yeah. If she was there, Karen Whitmore said, then she's the only person on this earth who can tell you, and you're scheduled to fight her. She went inside. Daniel Whitmore sat in that truck until 0411. At 0430, Emily Carter ran the perimeter road, 4 miles, same pace as every other morning, and this time she was not alone because at the 2-mile mark there was a figure standing at the edge of the road in Pete gear, with her hands wrapped in tape, and it was Jessica Miller. Emily slowed, did not stop. Miller. Ma'am, you're off grip work. Running's not grip work, ma'am. Emily kept moving. Jessica fell in beside her, and for about a 1/4 mile, neither of them said anything. Ma'am, permission to speak. You're going to anyway. Everybody does. I don't know why I bother. Ma'am, don't do it. Emily's stride did not change. Do what? Today. Jessica's voice was tight and not from the pace. Ma'am, I've seen him work. I've watched him for 6 weeks. He's not a fair man in a room like that. He's not. He plays the whistle. He plays the referee. He plays everything. And he's 60 pounds. 62. Ma'am, Emily stopped. She stopped so suddenly that Jessica went 4 steps past her and had to come back. And then Emily Carter looked at a 22-year-old from a town with 3 futures and said something she would not have said to anybody else on that base. Miller, 2 days ago you asked me if it hurt. Ma'am, and I told you the truth, which was a mistake, but it's done. Emily's breath was even. Jessica's was not. So I'm going to give you one more true thing, and then we're going to finish this run, and you are never going to bring it up again. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Everybody on this base thinks today is about whether I can beat Daniel Whitmore. Emily said it flatly. It isn't. I've known I could beat Daniel Whitmore since day 2. That was never a question. Not for 1 second, not for 1 hour. Jessica stared at her. Then what's it about, ma'am? And Emily Carter said, it's about making sure that when I do, there's nothing left for him to argue with. She started running again. Jessica Miller stood in the road for a second and then ran to catch up. And that was the moment she would say later, much later in front of that room full of lieutenants, that she stopped wanting to be like Commander Carter and started wanting to be able to do what Commander Carter did, which she would eventually explain, were 2 completely different ambitions, and only one of them was any good. At 0550, Marcus Doyle found Kyle Brandt in the smoke pit outside Building 4, and Marcus Doyle had not slept either. Kyle, Sergeant, put it out. Brandt looked at him, took a drag, did not put it out. Something on your mind. February, Doyle said. Brandt's hand paused about 2 inches from his mouth and then finished the motion smooth as anything. Don't know what that means. You were talking about Carter in February. Orders published in March. Doyle stepped in. You want to explain that to me, or you want me to go to explain it to the colonel? And Kyle Brandt smiled, and it was the smile of a man holding the only card that mattered. Marcus, he said, you go right ahead. You go to Bishop. You tell him Staff Sergeant Brandt knew something a month early. He flicked ash. And then you sit there and watch his face while he does the math on how a staff sergeant at a training command got the name of a person whose assignment was in a system he doesn't have access to. Doyle's stomach turned over. Who told you? Nobody told me. Kyle. Nobody told me. It came out of him with real heat, the first honest thing he'd said in 6 years. You think somebody handed it to me? I built it. 6 years. Every published billet, every promotion list, every citation with a redacted line, every retirement notice. I've got 3 boxes in my garage, Marcus. 3. My wife thinks it's taxes. His hand was shaking now. You want to know what 6 is in my garage, Marcus? 3. My wife thinks it's taxes. His hand was shaking now. You want to know what 6 years of that looks like? It looks like a man reading government paperwork at 2 in the morning while his kids sleep upstairs. That's what it looks like. And in February, a name lined up with a date, lined up with a unit, and it was her. So you're sure? I'm sure. Saucy. You're sure, Doyle said, based on paperwork. Based on 6 years. Kyle. Doyle's voice cracked, and he was not a man whose voice cracked. That's not being sure. That's being tired. There's a difference, and it's about a mile wide. Brant threw the cigarette down. He's my brother Marcus. He was Dan's kid, Doyle said. You ever think about that? You ever once think about what you handed that man in February? He'd have died before he touched a woman. He'd have died before it. And you put a name in his hand and let him carry it for 5 months, and then you stood there in the cockpit and watched him do it. Doyle stepped back. You didn't shove her, Kyle. You just aimed him. Brant did not answer. You gonna do it today? Doyle asked. Whatever it is you're gonna do, you're gonna do it today. And Kyle Brant said, I've been waiting 6 years, Sergeant. What's another 4 hours? At 0700, Colonel Ray Bishop's phone rang, and it was Hal Vance again. And this time Vance did not bother with the pause. Ray, pull it. No. Ray. I said no, Hal. You listen to Peg. Vance's voice had gone hard, and Bishop had known him 15 years and had heard that voice maybe twice. There's a general officer who called me at 6 in the morning at home. At home, Ray. He knows the name Carter. Do you understand what I'm telling you? He didn't ask about your program. He asked about her by name. And then he said, and I want you to hear this exactly. He said, make sure nothing happens to her today. Bishop sat down slowly. Say that again. Make sure nothing happens to her today. Hal, who is he? Ray. Who is he? I'm not going to say the name over a phone, Vanda said. But Ray, I've been in this 31 years, and I have never had a call like that in my life. The man wasn't protecting an officer. You understand? That's not what that was. He wasn't calling about a subordinate. Then what was he calling about? There was a very long silence on the line. He sounded like he owed her something, Hal Vance said. Bishop hung up and sat in his chair and looked at the gray flakes of dried clay that were still on his floor. Emily, he said out loud to nobody, what did you do out there? At 0800, Camp Blackridge stopped functioning. That is not an exaggeration, and the after-action review would eventually say so in polite language. The chow hall emptied 90 minutes early. 2 evolutions were quietly canceled by NCOs who did not want to be the man who made his element miss it. The motor pool locked up. A gunnery sergeant told his people to stand fast and then went himself, and every single one of them followed him, and he pretended not to notice. 800 people in one building. They filled the bleachers, and then they filled the floor around the bleachers, and then they stood 4 deep against the walls, and the ones who could not get in stood in the corridor and got it relayed back, whispered man to man like a bad radio. Bishop had put the cameras in himself. 4 of them, not on tripods with men behind them, and the men had been told in a voice Bishop had not used since he was a major, that if any one of those 4 cameras stopped recording for any reason whatsoever, the man behind it would spend the remainder of his enlistment counting things. At 0840, Daniel Whitmore walked in. The room did a thing that rooms do. It did not go silent. It went the other way for about 2 seconds, a rush of noise. 800 people all saying something to the man next to them, and then it collapsed into nothing. He walked to his side of the mat. He did not look at the bleachers. He set his cover down. He stood there with his hands loose at his sides. Doyle came over. Dan, don't. Dan, listen to me. Marcus, so help me God. Kyle knew in February, Doyle said fast low. He's been building it himself, 3 boxes in his garage. It's not intel, Dan. It's a scrapbook. He put it together out of pieces because he couldn't stand not knowing, and it might be right, and it might be nothing, but it is not a fact, and you have been carrying it like a fact for 5 months. Whitmore's eyes closed. I know, he said. Doyle stopped. You know, I asked him yesterday. Whitmore's voice was almost nothing. Marcus, I asked him yesterday, and he told me, and I threw him out of my office, and then I sat there for 2 hours and 20 minutes. His jaw flexed, and I still came in here. Then walk out. I can't. Why not? Because she's the only one who knows, Daniel Whitmore said. And Marcus Doyle finally understood what he had been watching for 16 days, and it was so much worse than he thought. At 0850, Emily Carter walked in. She came in through the side alone, no aide, no entourage, and she was in standard utilities like every other day. And she had the green notebook in her hand, and she walked to the far side of the mat and set the notebook down on the deck beside her boots and did not look at it again. 800 people watched her do it. Reyes was against the wall with his hands behind his back and his mouth shut exactly as ordered, and his heart was going so hard he could feel it in his teeth. Jessica Miller was in the third row of the bleachers with her taped hands in her lap, and she had not blinked in about 40 seconds. Kyle Brandt was in the second row, dead center, 3 feet from the mat, and Colonel Ray Bishop stood up. Listen up. Nothing. Total stillness. This is a scheduled evaluation from the standing curriculum, Bishop said. It is on the calendar. It has been on the calendar. Every man in this room has done it or will do it. It is being recorded on 4 cameras, and the footage is retained, and I will personally review every second of it. He paused. There is no other content in this event. Anybody in this room who thinks there is wrong, and I'd advise him to keep being wrong quietly. Nobody moved. Referee's word is final. Contact is controlled. The evolution ends when I say it ends or when a participant says it ends. He looked at the mat. Begin. At 0852, they stepped onto the mat, and Daniel Whitmore, standing 4 feet from her, said the first words he had said to her since the corridor. Ma'am, instructor, I want to say something. Say it. Not now. His throat moved. After. And Emily Carter looked at him for exactly 1 second and said, okay. The whistle went. He came at her. Not wild. That was what surprised the room. Everybody in that building had been braced for a bull, and what they got was a technician, because whatever else was true about Daniel Whitmore, 19 years does not go away just because a man is coming apart. He came forward in a good stance with his hands right, and he closed the distance the way you are supposed to close distance, and he reached. And she was not there. Not dramatically. She did not spin, she did not leap, she did not do anything that would have looked like anything on a camera. She moved about 11 inches to her left at exactly the wrong moment for him, and his hand closed on air. And by the time he adjusted, she had already adjusted to his adjustment. He reached again. Air. Again, air. 19 seconds went by. Somebody in the bleachers said, "What is she doing?" Because she was not attacking. That was the thing nobody could process. She was not trying to hit him. She was not trying to take him down. She was just not being where he was over and over with an economy that was almost boring to watch. And the reason it was almost boring to watch was that it was the most efficient thing any of them had ever seen. And efficiency does not look like anything. 30 seconds. 40. Daniel Whitmore had not touched her once. And in the second row, 3 feet from the mat, Kyle Brandt started to understand, and his face began to change. At the 1 minute mark, Whitmore stopped. He stepped back, and he was breathing, and she was not, and he stood there with his hands still up, and he said loud enough for the first 10 rows to hear it, "Fight me." Emily Carter said nothing. "Fight me," nothing. And Daniel Whitmore's voice broke open in front of 800 people. "That's what you've been doing since March," he said, "every day, every single day. I say a thing, you don't fight me. I question you, you don't fight me. I put you in the dirt in front of 400 people, and you get up and you say, continue the training." He was shaking. "You won't fight me. Nobody will fight me. Nobody will fight me, and nobody will tell me anything. And I have been standing in the middle of this for 6 years, so fight me." He came in, and this time he was not a technician. The room made a sound. 800 people made one sound low, and Bishop was already halfway out of his seat. Emily Carter dropped her hips, took his left wrist as it passed, and did not fight it. She went with it. She turned inside his own force like a door on a hinge, and Daniel Whitmore's 19 years of momentum went exactly where he had aimed it, which was through the space where she used to be, and she guided it about 4 more degrees than he intended. He hit the mat. The whole building felt it. She was not on top of him. She had not ridden him down. She had let go at the last instant and stepped back, and she was standing 3 feet away with her hands at her sides while a 210-pound Marine instructor lay flat on his back in front of every person he had trained in 11 years. 3 seconds. That was the whole thing. 3 seconds from his commitment to his back. Nobody clapped. Nobody made a sound. 800 people sat there and had to physically rearrange something in their heads. Whitmore got up. She let him. He came again. She put him down again. 4 seconds this time because he had adjusted and she had adjusted to the adjustment. And the second one was worse than the first because the second one had no explanation. The first one, a man could tell himself he slipped. The second one was a sentence being read aloud. He got up. "Instructor," Bishop said, "stand fast." Whitmore did not hear him. He came a third time, and this one the room saw for what it was, and Doyle came off the wall and got 2 steps before somebody caught his arm, and Jessica Miller stood straight up in the third row with both hands over her mouth. Because the third one was not a technique. The third one was a man trying to hurt somebody. And Emily Carter took his right hand as it came because she had known it was coming since day 2 because his left shoulder had dropped 2 inches. Because it always did, because 19 years and nobody had ever corrected him. She took the wrist. She took the elbow. She turned him 180 degrees and put him face down on the mat and put her knee across his shoulder blade and locked it, and Daniel Whitmore was done. Completely. Not hurt. Just done in the total mathematical way a man is done when there is no lever left anywhere in his body. 6 seconds. The building was silent. Emily Carter leaned down, and in a voice that only he could hear, she said, "You dropped your shoulder." Whitmore made a sound into the mat. 19 years, she said quietly. Every single time. Nobody ever told you, instructor, because nobody ever beat you. That's what happens to excellent people. They stop getting told. He was shaking under her knee. "Get off me. In a second. Get off me." And that was when Kyle Brandt stood up in the second row and screamed it. "Ask her about my brother." The building detonated. 800 people came up off the bleachers at once, a roar of noise, and Bishop was on his feet shouting for security, and the cameras were still running, and Reyes had come off the wall about 4 feet before he remembered his orders and locked up. Ask her. Brandt was climbing over the rail, and 2 men had him, and he was dragging both of them. Ask her who was in the room. Ask her Dan marched 6 years ago. Ask her whose sleeve he was holding. And Daniel Whitmore, face down on the mat with a knee across his back, stopped moving entirely. Everything stopped. Bishop stopped. The noise did not stop, but Whitmore's world did, and later he would say that the strangest part was that he could still hear the room perfectly, every word, 800 people, but none of it was happening to him. "Get off me," he said. Emily Carter got off. He rolled over. He got up on his knees. He did not stand. And he looked up at her from the mat with his mouth open, 47 years old, 19 years a Marine, a man who had gotten other people's sons home, kneeling in front of a woman he had put in the mud 4 days earlier. And he said one word. The room was going insane behind him, and neither of them heard it. "Instructor." "Was he holding your sleeve?" "Daniel." She had never used his first name, not once in 16 days. It went through him like a spike. "Answer me." He was not shouting. That was the terrible part. He was asking. "Ma'am, Commander, please. 6 years, 4 packets, 4, denied, please." And Emily Carter standing on a mat in front of 800 people and 4 running cameras with a general officer's phone call, sitting in a colonel's ear, and every regulation in the world telling her to say nothing, looked down at Daniel Whitmore and made a decision. "Colonel Bishop," she said. Bishop's head snapped around. "Clear the building, sir." "Commander." "Sir." She did not look away from Whitmore. "Clear the building, kill the cameras, everybody out." And Ray Bishop, 62 years old, 1 year from retirement, with a general officer's voice still in his head, looked at that mat for 2 full seconds, and then said the sentence that ended his quiet career and saved something else. "Everybody out," he said. "Now, cameras off, everybody out." It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes for 800 people to leave a building they did not want to leave, and every one of them looking back, and Kyle Brandt fighting the whole way, screaming, until Doyle got in front of him and took his face in both hands like a father and said something nobody else heard, and Brandt stopped fighting and started crying right there in front of everybody, 43 years old, and Doyle walked him out with an arm around his shoulders. Jessica Miller was the last one in the bleachers. She did not want to go. Reyes came and got her. Miller. Sir, come on. At the door she stopped and looked back, and the two of them were still there, the commander standing and the instructor on his knees, and she said, Sir, what's happening? And Aaron Reyes, who was the only person in that building who knew, said something that should have happened 6 years ago. The doors closed. At 0909, Camp Blackridge held 4 people. Emily Carter, Daniel Whitmore, Ray Bishop at the door because he would not leave and she did not make him, and a stop camera with a man standing beside it who had been told to go and had gone. Whitmore was still on his knees. Get up, Emily said. No. Daniel. I can't. His voice was gone. Ma'am, I can't. My legs won't. So Emily Carter did the last thing anybody would have predicted. She sat down on the mat. She sat down cross-legged 3 feet from him, a Navy commander in utilities, sitting on the deck of a training hangar, and she put her hands on her knees and she said, Okay, then we'll sit. Whitmore made a sound. Ask me, she said. Ma'am, ask me, instructor. You've got 1 shot. There's no lawyer in here, and there's no camera. And in about an hour, there's going to be a phone call from a building with no windows, and after that, neither of us is ever going to be allowed to have this conversation again. So ask me, right now. Daniel Whitmore looked at the mat. Were you there? He said, yes. The word went into that empty hangar and did not echo because hangars full of nothing do not echo, they just swallow. Whitmore did not move for 8 seconds. How long? He said. 11 minutes. 11? He stopped. His mouth worked. They told me it was instant. They told Kyle's mother it was instant. There's a letter. There's a letter in my house that says it was instant. I know, Emily said. I've read it. You've read it. Instructor, Emily said. I wrote the part they took out. And Daniel Whitmore put his hands flat on the mat and lowered his head and made a sound that Ray Bishop, standing at the door 40 feet away, would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. Emily Carter waited. She waited a long time. She did not touch him. She did not say anything comforting. She sat there on the deck with her hands on her knees and let a 47-year-old man come apart in front of her because she had learned somewhere in some room at some cost that the worst thing you can do to a man in that condition is help him. When he could talk, he said, Tell me. Are you sure, ma'am? Daniel, I need you to understand something. Her voice was very level. You've spent 6 years wanting this, and in about 4 minutes you're going to have it, and you don't get to give it back. Whatever you've got in your head right now, whatever version you've built to sleep at night, it goes away today, and this one replaces it permanently forever, and you will carry this one instead. So I'm asking you once, are you sure? Daniel Whitmore looked up at her. Ma'am, he said, I taught that kid to tie the knot that was on his kit. I know, Emily said. It held. And something happened in his face that had no name. What? It held, she said again. That's the first thing I'm telling you, because it's the first thing you need. Whatever you've been doing at 2 a.m. for 6 years, whatever you've been checking, whatever you've been going back over. It held, instructor. Your work held. That is not what happened to him. Whitmore's hands were shaking on the mat. Then what happened to him? Emily Carter took a breath. He was doing his job, she said. Correctly, in the right order, at the right speed. He was better than 4 other people in that room, and 2 of them outranked him. He made one decision in about a second and a half that I have gone over 11,000 times, and Daniel, I need you to hear this from someone who was there and who has had 6 years and every resource on earth to review it. The decision was right. It was the right call. It was the right call, and it went wrong anyway, and those are 2 different things, and there is not a man alive who can make them into one thing. He was 23. Yes, he was 23 years old, ma'am. Yes, Emily said, he was. Whitmore's face contorted. Was he scared? And there it was. Emily Carter closed her eyes for 1 second and then opened them because there are questions you do not get to close your eyes for. At the end, she said, no, don't. I'm not. Don't you lie to me. It tore out of him. Everybody's lied to me for 6 years. The letter lied to me. The packet lied to me. Don't you sit there and... Instructor. She did not raise her voice at all. In the first 4 minutes, he was terrified. He was terrified the way a person is terrified, which is that it is not brave and it is not cinematic. It is a 23-year-old asking the same question over and over. He asked for his mother at minute 3. He asked for you at minute 5. Whitmore stopped breathing. He asked for me. He said, and I am quoting because I have not forgotten one word of it in 6 years. He said, Whitmore's gonna be so mad at me. And Daniel Whitmore folded. He went all the way down forehead to the mat, and Emily Carter sat there with her hands on her knees and let him. And at the door, Ray Bishop turned around and faced the wall because he could not do it. He was 62 and he could not do it. It went on for a while. When it stopped, Whitmore stayed down. Finish it, he said into the mat. Daniel, finish it, ma'am, please. At minute 9, Emily said, he asked me one question. Whitmore lifted his head. He'd stopped being scared by then. That's a real thing, it happens. It's not courage, it's chemistry, and I'm not going to dress it up for you. He was calm. He had my sleeve in his left hand, and he had it hard enough that they had to open his fingers afterward. Her voice did not change at all, and that was how Bishop, 40 feet away facing a wall, knew what it was costing her. And he looked at me and he said, Ma'am, did I do it right? Silence. And I said yes. Whitmore was staring at her. And that was the truth, Emily Carter said. That's the part I need you to hold on to, instructor, because I have watched a lot of people ask that question, and I have lied to almost every one of them, and I have never once been sorry about it. But I didn't lie to him. He did do it right. He did it exactly the way you taught him, right up until the last second and through it. And the only reason I am able to sit on this mat and tell you that is that he did it right, because if he hadn't, I'd have died in that room too. The hangar was completely silent. Daniel Whitmore looked at her for a long, long time. You'd have died, he said. Yes. You're telling me my kid. I'm telling you, Emily Carter said, that I am alive because a 23-year-old from a training command in Virginia knew what to do because a Marine instructor with a bad knee and a hole in his promotion record taught him correctly on that field out there, 400 yards from where you are sitting right now. And Daniel Whitmore said in a voice like a man who has been underwater for 6 years, that's why you came here. Emily Carter did not answer. That's why you took this job. He was up on his knees now, staring at her. Ma'am, look at me. That's why you took this job, isn't it? There's 100 billets. There's 100. You're a commander with a phone call from a general in your file, and you came to a training base in Virginia. You came to Blackridge, and I never once asked why nobody asked why. We all just decided it was politics. Emily said nothing. Say it. Instructor. Ma'am, 4 days ago, I put you in the mud. His voice was rising and cracking at once, in front of 400 people, and you got up and you said, continue the training. And I have not slept since, so you say it. You look at me and you say it. And Emily Carter, sitting cross-legged on a mat in an empty hangar, said, I came to see where he learned it. Whitmore's face broke. And then I got here, she said. And I found out that the man who taught him had spent 6 years being told he wasn't cleared to know what happened and had gone so far into that hole that he was ready to put his hands on a stranger's back because a staff sergeant handed him a name in February. She stood up. And that's when I stopped writing a curriculum instructor and started writing something else. She walked over and picked up the green notebook off the deck. 16 days, she said. 11 pages. Your stance, your timing, your knee, your shoulder. Everybody thinks I was studying you so I could beat you. She held it out to him. Take it. Ma'am, take it, Daniel. He took it, and his hands were not steady. I was studying you, Emily Carter said, because that boy died holding my sleeve, and I wanted to know exactly who made him. Every detail, every habit, every single thing that was in him that came from you so that I could look at it and understand it and know what he was. Daniel Whitmore held that notebook in both hands and looked up at her, and he was not a Marine, he was not an instructor, he was not 50 pounds heavier or 19 years anything. Ma'am, he whispered, what have I done? And 40 feet away at the door of an empty hangar, with 4 cameras off and 800 people locked outside and a general officer's voice still ringing in his ear, Colonel Ray Bishop heard the first 3 notes of a siren coming up the road from the main gate. The kind of vehicle that does not come to a training base. The kind vehicle that comes from a building with no windows. At 0941, 2 vehicles came through the main gate without stopping, and the gate guard, a 19-year-old Lance Corporal, did not ask them to, because you do not ask. Bishop met them at the hangar door. The man who got out of the lead vehicle was in a civilian suit and had a face like a filing cabinet. And the second man was a full-bird Colonel Bishop had never seen in his life, which at his age and in his community was itself a kind of information. Colonel Bishop, that's me. Where is she? Inside. Is the footage retained? And Ray Bishop, 62 years old, 1 year from a retirement that he had spent 4 years protecting, said, "There isn't any." The man in the suit stopped walking. "Say again." "I killed the cameras," Bishop said. 32 minutes ago, my order, my signatures on the log. 4 cameras, 4 operators, all of them stood down by me personally. He put his hands behind his back. "So whatever you drove out here to see, sir, you're welcome to it. It's nothing. There's nothing on it." The two men looked at each other. "Colonel," the bird said quietly, "do you understand what you've done? I've got a pretty good idea." "You destroyed—" "I didn't destroy anything. I never made it." Bishop's voice did not move. "I've been running this base 4 years, and I've spent every one of them getting out of the way of things. Ask anybody. Ask Hal Vance. He'll tell you Ray Bishop's a man who doesn't make waves." He looked at the hangar door. "I made one." The man in the suit studied him for a long moment, and then he did something Bishop did not expect at all. He nodded once. "Good," he said. Bishop blinked. "Sir." "I said good." The man's face did not change. "Colonel, do you think I drove 90 minutes from a building I'm not going to name to make sure that conversation got recorded?" He started walking again. "I drove out here to make sure it happened." Bishop stood there with his mouth open. At 0946, they came into the hangar, and Emily Carter did not look surprised. That was the thing Whitmore noticed even in the state he was in, kneeling on a mat holding a green notebook in both hands. She did not look surprised. She looked like a woman waiting for a bus that was running exactly on time. "Commander?" "Sir, you want to tell me what happened here?" "I conducted a scheduled evaluation from the standing curriculum," Emily said. "And then I had a private conversation with an instructor." "A private conversation?" "Yes, sir." "About what?" And Emily Carter said, "About whether his work held." The man in the suit stopped about 10 feet away and looked at Daniel Whitmore for a long, long moment. "You're Whitmore." Whitmore tried to stand and could not, and then did anyway, and his legs held him about as well as anything had held him that morning. "Yes, sir." 4 packets. "Sir." "You submitted 4 packets, the man said. March that same August, the following spring, and 18 months ago. All 4 came to my desk, not near it, to it." He let that sit. "I denied all 4. The hangar was very quiet. Whitmore's hands closed on the notebook. "But," he said. "Me." "Why?" And the man in the suit, who had a face like a filing cabinet and a voice like a door closing, said, "Because you weren't cleared instructor." "That's it. That's the whole reason. There isn't a better one, and I've had 6 years to find one." His jaw moved slightly. "You want to hear something? I read your first packet 11 times, 11. I have never read a piece of paper 11 times in my career, and then I wrote, 'Not releasable at this level' on it, because that's what the rule says, and I went home and my wife asked how my day was, and I said, fine." Daniel Whitmore stared at him. "That's it," he said. "That's it. 6 years, and that's it. That's it. I taught him. I know. I taught that boy to tie the knot that was on his kit, and you sat in a room and wrote 3 words on a piece of paper and went home and said, fine." "Yes," the man said, "and I did." And nobody in that hangar said anything for about 5 seconds. Then the man in the suit said, "Instructor, I've been doing this 34 years, and I want to tell you the thing I've learned, and it is the only thing I have, so you can do whatever you want with it. The rule is not there because we think you can't take it. The rule is there because if we make one exception for the man who deserves it most, then there's no rule, there's just a list of people we like." He looked at Whitmore steadily. "And that has never once made it easier, not one time, not for 6 years." At 0952, Emily Carter said, "Sir, are you here to charge me?" Everything stopped. The bird colonel looked at the floor. "Commander," the man in the suit said, "sit down." "I'll stand, sir." "Emily." He said her first name, and Whitmore's head came up. "Sit down." She sat down on the mat. He sat down on the mat too, in a suit cross-legged, 90 minutes from a building with no windows, and it was the single strangest thing Ray Bishop had ever seen in 40 years of service. "You broke about 4 things this morning," the man said. "Yes, sir." You want to tell me why? No, sir. Try anyway. And Emily Carter said, because a rule that produces a man like that is not a rule that's working, sir. It's a rule that's being obeyed. Those aren't the same, and everybody in this hangar knows it. The man in the suit was silent. Sir, she said, the packet was denied 4 times and the space stayed empty, and a staff sergeant filled it in February with a scrapbook out of his garage, and 4 days ago that man put his hands on my back in front of 400 people because of what got poured into a hole you and I left open. Her voice did not rise. You want to charge somebody for that, sir, charge me, but not for today. Today's the only part I'd do again. Nobody breathed. The man in the suit looked at her for a very long moment. Commander, he said, who do you think made the phone call this morning? Emily's head came up. Sir, us, 6 o'clock to Colonel Vance's house. He said it flatly. Make sure nothing happens to her today. Bishop made a sound at the door. That was you, Emily said. That was me. Sir, why? And the man in the suit said, because I read the report, Commander, 11 times, and I know whose sleeve he was holding. Emily Carter did not move. I've had your name on a page for 6 years, he said quietly, and I have never once been able to say a word to you about it either. Do you understand the rule cuts both ways? It cut you too. You've been carrying that boy for 6 years in a room with no one in it, same as him. He nodded at Whitmore. 2 people, 1 event, both of them alone, because of 3 words I wrote on a form. He got up off the mat. So no, he said, I'm not here to charge you. Then what are you here for, sir? And the man in the suit reached into his jacket and took out an envelope and held it out to Daniel Whitmore. Instructor, he said, 5th packet. Whitmore stared at it. I never filed a 5th packet. No, the man said. She did. And Daniel Whitmore's legs finally went and Bishop got to him before he hit the mat. At 10:04, Whitmore was sitting on the edge of the mat with the envelope in his lap unopened and his hands flat on top of it like it might get away. She filed it in April, the man in the suit said. 6 days after she reported to this base, before she'd met you, before you'd said a word to her, before the mud. He looked at Emily. It got to me in May. I denied it. Whitmore's head came up. You denied it. Of course I denied it. It came from a commander with no standing to request it on behalf of an instructor she'd never met. The man's mouth did something that on another face might have been a smile. So she filed it again in May and in June, and she filed it 11 days ago, which was the day after she watched you take a young Marine apart on a rope, and she attached something to that one. What? Whitmore said. What did she attach? Your training file, Emily said quietly. The personal note. Whitmore closed his eyes. Best I ever had, the man in the suit said. If I'd had a son. He looked at the envelope. Instructor, I have denied 4 of your packets and 3 of hers. 7. And then I read a sentence you wrote in a training file 6 years ago that you never intended another human being to see, and I sat in my office for 2 hours, and then I picked up a phone I have picked up maybe 9 times in my life. Nobody spoke. It's not the whole thing, he said. It'll never be the whole thing. There's 4 pages in there, and 2 of them have holes in them, and I fought for 11 days to get you those 2. He turned toward the door. But it's got the timeline, it's got the sequence, and it's got a line in it that says his work was correct in writing signed by people whose names you can't read. He stopped at the door beside Bishop. Colonel. Sir, that thing you did with the cameras. Bishop straightened. Sir, I'll take whatever's coming. Nothing's coming. The man looked at it on. But Ray, next time do it faster. You stood at that door for 11 minutes deciding. And Ray Bishop said, Sir, I'm 62. 11 minutes is fast. At 10:19, Emily Carter walked out of that hangar alone, and there were 400 people standing outside it. They had not gone anywhere. 800 had been ordered out, and half of them had gone back to their duty, and half of them had stood in the sun for 90 minutes without a single NCO telling them to. And now they were standing in the road, and they saw her come out, and nobody said anything. Reyes was in front. Ma'am? Lieutenant? Ma'am, are you? He stopped because it was not a useful question. He tried again. Ma'am, what do you need? And Emily Carter said, Get Brant. The whole road went cold. Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Brant, wherever they've got him, bring him to my office. She kept walking. And Lieutenant, do not put a hand on him. He walks in on his own, or he doesn't come. At 10:52, Kyle Brandt walked into her office on his own. His eyes were destroyed. He stood at attention like a man standing in front of a firing squad, and he did not say a word. Emily did not look up for a second. Then she did. Sit down, Staff Sergeant. I'll stand, ma'am. Sit down, Kyle. And that broke him faster than anything else could have. He sat. Ma'am, he said, do it. Whatever it is, I'm not going to fight it. I did all of it. February, the file thing, the caption, the whiteboard. All of it's me. Nobody helped me. Don't let anybody take any of it. Emily reached into her drawer and put something on the desk in front of him. It was a photograph. A kid 23 grinning filthy, sunburned across the nose. Kyle Brandt looked at it and his whole body changed shape. Where did you get that? His personnel file. That's, his voice went, ma'am, that's my brother. I know, Emily said. Kyle, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything, because I'm only going to be able to do this once. He couldn't speak. He nodded. You were right, she said. Brandt's face came apart. 6 years, 3 boxes in your garage, every roster, every list at 2 in the morning while your kids slept upstairs. Emily's voice was steady and low. Everybody told you it was grief. Everybody told you it was a scrapbook. Marcus told you it was being tired instead of being sure. She looked at him. You were right, Staff Sergeant. You found it. You did it with public paperwork in 6 years and no help from anybody on earth, and you were right. Kyle Brandt put his face in his hands. And that's what nobody's ever going to say to you, Emily said. So I'm saying it. You were right about the name. You were wrong about everything under it, and I'll get to that. But you were right, and you deserve to hear it out loud one time from the person who was there. He was sobbing. Ma'am, he got out. Ma'am, I aimed him. Doyle said it. I aimed him at you. Yes, Emily said, you did. I've known him 11 years. He'd have died before he touched a woman. Ma'am, I broke him. I broke the best man on this base with a piece of paper out of my garage because I couldn't stand not knowing. He looked up, wrecked. What do I do? Tell me what to do. And Emily Carter said, he's in the hangar right now. He's got 4 pages in an envelope and nobody in the world to read them with. Brandt stopped breathing. Ma'am, 2 of the pages have holes in them, Emily said. The rest of it's the timeline. Ma'am, he won't. Kyle, she stood up. You've got a brother in that envelope. So does he. Go read it with him. Kyle Brandt stood up, and he was shaking so hard he had to put a hand on her desk. Ma'am, what do I say to him? And Emily Carter said, start with, I'm sorry. It's not enough. Nothing's enough. Say it anyway, and then sit down next to him and turn the page. At 11:31, Marcus Doyle walked past the hangar and did not go in. He stood outside it for a minute with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand, and he could hear 2 men in there, and he could not make out any words, and he did not want to. 19 years in the Corps, 1 goal left, retire without getting involved in anything. Marcus Doyle stood outside that hangar and thought about a smoke pit and a man saying, I'm just saying what I heard, and himself 8 feet away with a cup of coffee saying nothing. He'd had that coffee for 4 years. He poured it out in the grass and went to find the colonel. But Colonel Ray Bishop had been expecting somebody all morning, and he was not surprised when the knock came, but he was surprised at who it was. Doyle. Sir. Sergeant, if you're here to tell me something about this morning, I'd like to point out that I was there for all of it. No, sir. Doyle stood in the doorway with his cover in his hand. I'm here to tell you something about February. Bishop set down his pen. Sit down. I'd rather not, sir. Marcus, I have had exactly 1 man sit down in this office in 2 days, and it was a full colonel from a building I'm not allowed to name, and I have decided that I like it when people sit down. Sit. Doyle sat, and then he said the thing he had driven himself here to say, and it came out flat the way a man says a thing he has already sentenced himself for. Sir, I heard Brandt in the smoke pit, not once, probably 9-10 times going back to February. And I stood there with a cup of coffee, and I didn't say a word. His jaw worked. Not to him, not to you, not to Dan. Nobody. Bishop did not say anything. I've got 4 months to my 20, sir, and I've spent 19 years being the guy who doesn't get involved, and I was proud of that. Doyle's voice cracked once, and he ran right over it. I was proud of it. I used to say it like it was a virtue. Marcus doesn't get in the middle. And this morning I watched a 47-year-old man go down on his knees in a hangar, and I watched a woman sit on the deck with him because there was nobody else. And sir, there should have been somebody else. There should have been me. In February, in a smoke pit, 8 feet away. He put a hand on his knees. I'd like to make a statement, sir, on the record, about what I heard and when I heard it and what I did about it, which was nothing. Bishop looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, he said, you understand what a statement like that does to a retirement? Yes, sir. You understand that nobody's asking you for it. That's kind of the point, sir. And Ray Bishop, who had spent 4 years perfecting the art of not being in the room, said something that surprised both of them. No, Doyle blinked. Sir, I said no. Bishop leaned forward. Sergeant, I'm going to tell you what I've learned in the last 48 hours, and I've learned more in 48 hours than in the previous 4 years, so you're getting it fresh, and it might not be worth much. He tapped the desk. There is a kind of man who, when he finally figures out he was wronged and wants to be punished for it, immediately, loudly, on paper, and he thinks that that's courage. He shook his head. It isn't. It's just the last move. It's the cheapest thing in the world, Marcus, because once you're punished, you're done, and being done is comfortable. Doyle stared at him. Sir, you want to write a statement? Write a statement. I'll put it in the file, and it'll sit there and do nothing for anybody. Bishop's voice hardened. Or you can walk back out that door and go find the next Kyle Brandt. Because there's always one sergeant. There's one in every smoke pit on every base in this country right now, and he's been building something in his garage for 6 years, and nobody's said his brother's name out loud to him in all that time. That's the job. That's your last 4 months. You want penance. That's penance. Paper isn't. Doyle sat there. Sir, he said finally, permission to speak freely. You've been doing it for 10 minutes. That's the first time I've ever heard you say anything. And Ray Bishop laughed out loud for the first time in about a year. Yeah, he said. Well, turns out that was the problem. At 1340, Emily Carter found out what a bass sounds like when it changes its mind. It sounds like nothing. That was what she had not expected. She had expected something. Applause was too much to hope for, and she did not want it anyway. But she had expected a difference she could hear, and there was none. The chow hall was a chow hall. The road was a road. Men came to attention and said, ma'am, and moved on. But at 1412, she came out of Building 2, and a corporal she had never spoken to in her life was standing there holding the door. He did not say anything. He just held it. And 100 feet down the road, a lance corporal saw it happen and filed it. That is how it actually goes. Not a speech, not a moment, a door. At 1500, Aaron Reyes came into her office and shut the door behind him and stood there. Ma'am, Lieutenant, I've got to say something, and I've got to say it wrong. Emily put her pen down. Go. Ma'am, I was in that hangar, and I stood against the wall with my hands behind my back and my mouth shut exactly the way you told me, and when Brandt started screaming, I got about 4 feet before I remembered. He was not shaking. He had gone past shaking into something colder and steadier. And I have spent 6 hours trying to figure out why you gave that order, and I finally got it, and ma'am, I'm not sure I can forgive you for it. Emily said, tell me what you got. You needed a witness. Keep going. You needed one person in that building who understood what was happening while it was happening. Not after, not on a report, during. His voice tightened, because you knew there was a chance it went the other way. You knew there was a chance he came off that mat and finished it, and if he did, then everybody in that room would have told the same story for 30 years, and the story would have been, she got what was coming. And you needed exactly one person on this earth who could stand up and say, no, that's not what that was. Emily didn't move. Ma'am, Reyes said, you didn't show me that folder because I earned it. You showed me because you were making arrangements. The office was very quiet. Yes, Emily Carter said, Reyes' eyes closed. Ma'am, say it. That's the coldest thing I've ever heard in my life. Lieutenant, Emily said, when you've been at this a while, you're going to find out that the two coldest things that a person can do are to plan for the worst and to say it out loud. And you're going to find out that almost nobody does the second one. She stood up. I could have let you think it was a gift. I let you figure it out instead. That's the only respect I had available. Reyes stood there for a second. Then he said, "Ma'am, permission to ask a real question." "Go." "If he'd finished it, if he'd come off that mat and hurt you." Reyes's voice went thin. "What was I supposed to do?" And Emily Carter said, "Exactly what you did. Nothing. And then you were supposed to live for 40 years and tell it right." Reyes made a small sound. "Ma'am, that's a hell of a thing to hand a 26-year-old. "Yes," Emily said. "It is, and I'm sorry. And I'd do it again, and I want you to hear both halves of that sentence because that's what this job is, and nobody ever tells you until you're already in it." Reyes stood there for a long moment. Then he straightened. "Ma'am, permission to stay on as your aide." Emily almost smiled. "You were never leaving, Lieutenant." "No, ma'am," Aaron Reyes said. "I guess I wasn't." At 1820, Daniel Whitmore came to her office, and he came alone, and he stood in the doorway for about 4 seconds before he could make himself walk through it. The envelope was in his hand. It was open now. "Ma'am, instructor, I've got about 9 things to say, and I don't know the order." "Then sit down and say them wrong." He sat, he put the envelope on the desk between them, and neither of them touched it. "Kyle read it with me," he said. "I know. It took 2 hours." His voice was hoarse, a used-up voice, the voice of a man who had been through something and out the other side and had not slept in 4 days. "Ma'am, there's a page in there where they've blacked out about a third of it, and Kyle kept trying to read around the black. He'd hold it up to the light. 43 years old, holding a piece of paper up to a window like a kid." He stopped, and then he put it down and he said, "Dan, it doesn't matter what's under it. He did it right. It says so. It says so in writing." Emily said nothing. And I said, "Kyle, that's the part she already told me." Whitmore looked up, and he said, "Yeah, but now it's in writing, and she didn't have to give us either one." The office was quiet. "Ma'am, that man has hated you for 5 months." "I know, so I know." And he sat on the floor of that hangar and said that. "Instructor," Emily said, "he didn't hate me. He hated a shape. I was just the only thing standing in it." Whitmore's hands closed on his knees. "Okay," he said. "Okay, here's the first thing." He took a breath. "I'm sorry." "Daniel." "No, ma'am, let me get through it because I've been rehearsing it since about 4 this morning, and if you interrupt me, I'm going to lose it." His jaw worked. "I put my hands on your back in front of 400 people, from behind, when you weren't looking. And I did it because I wanted you to scream so that everybody could see that you were what I needed you to be." He looked her in the eye and made himself keep looking. "That's not a mistake. Ma'am, I've been calling it a mistake in my head for 4 days, and it's not a mistake. A mistake is when you meant to do one thing and did another. I did exactly what I meant to do. I planned it for 11 days. Emily did not look away. "So I'm not going to sit here and ask you to forgive it," Whitmore said. "That's not what I came for. Ma'am, if you forgive me right now, I'll never get past it because I'll have gotten off, and I don't want off." His voice broke and he shoved it back down. "I want the other thing." "What other thing?" "I want you to make me pay for it," Daniel Whitmore said. "Not with my career? That's easy. Take my career, I'll go work at a hardware store, and I'll be free in about 6 weeks, and that's a bargain, and we both know it." He leaned forward. "Ma'am, make me stay. Make me stay here and stand in front of these people every day knowing what they saw. Make me stand in front of Miller. That's the bill. That's the real bill. I'm asking you to send me the real bill." And Emily Carter said no. Whitmore's head came up. "Ma'am." I said no. She stood up. "Instructor, that's the 3rd time today somebody's come in this room and asked me to punish him, and I'm getting tired of it." Her voice sharpened. "Doyle wants to write a statement. Brandt wants me to end him. Now you want a bill. You know what all 3 of you actually want? You want to be done. You want somebody to hand you a number and let you pay it because a number has an end on it, and what you've actually got has no end on it at all." Whitmore stared at her. "Ma'am, you don't get a bill, Daniel." She came around the desk. "You get a Tuesday, and then another Tuesday, and on every one of them, you are going to get up and go out on that field and be the best pair of hands in the Marine Corps. And some of those days, it's going to feel like penance, and most of them, it's just going to feel like work, and that's the whole thing. That's it. That's the entire sentence, and it runs until you retire." "That's not enough." Of course, it's not enough. It came out of her with a heat that Whitmore had never heard and would never hear again. Nothing's enough. You can't make it enough. You put your hands on me, and there is no arrangement of days that unmakes it, and there never will be. An instructor, welcome to the world, because that is the exact condition every single person on this base is already living in, and most of them figured it out a lot younger than you. She stopped. Got it back. There's going to be consequences, she said level again. Real ones. On paper. Bishop's writing it, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to follow you, and I'm not going to soften a word of it. But that's administration, Daniel. That's not the bill. She sat back down. The bill is that you're going to know every day for the rest of your life, and you're going to have to be useful anyway. Daniel Whitmore sat there for a long time. Ma'am, he said finally, that's the worst thing anybody's ever said to me. Yes. And it's the only thing anybody said to me in 6 years that I believe. At 0600 the next morning, Daniel Whitmore was on the field before Emily Carter was. That was the first thing anybody noticed, and it went around that base in about 11 minutes. The second thing they noticed was that he did not say anything about it. He did not make a speech. He did not apologize to the formation. He stood there with a clipboard and ran the evolution, and at 0640, he corrected a private's grip on a rope, and at 0710, he told a staff sergeant that his low crawl was garbage in exactly the voice he had always used. And at 0750, he came to Jessica Miller's element. The whole line went rigid, because everybody knew. Everybody had been there on the rope, and everybody had been in that hangar, and now here was Whitmore standing in front of the 22-year-old he had taken apart in public 11 days ago, and 400 people were watching to see what a broken man does. Miller. Instructor. Hands. Jessica held them out. The tape was gone. The palms had healed rough and ugly. Whitmore looked at them for a second. That's rope burn under a callus, he said. That's the worst kind. You can't see it, so nobody believes it. Jessica's eyes came up fast because those were not his words, and she knew exactly whose words they were. Yes, instructor. Who taught you to go slow? The commander instruction. That's right. Whitmore's jaw moved. You take the traverse today. Whole element watches. Instructor. You heard me? He raised his voice so the line got it. Miller runs it. Everybody watch her hands because she does it right and none of the rest of you do. And Jessica Miller stood there with her mouth open. Instructor, she said. Permission to say something. Denied. Instructor. Miller. He looked at her, and for 1 second, only the thing under his face came all the way to the surface. If you say it, I'm going to have to hear it, and I've had about all I can take this week. Get on the rope, Tikuya. She got on the rope. She went slow. She went ugly. She went perfect. And Daniel Whitmore stood underneath her with a stopwatch in his hand and did not look at it once. At 10:30, Emily Carter and Kyle Brandt had a conversation that nobody witnessed and that neither of them ever repeated. What is known as this. He came to her office and he was in his service uniform, not utilities, which meant something. And he had a piece of paper. Ma'am, request for separation. Emily read it. Denied. Ma'am, you can't deny it. It's not that kind of paper. Then why'd you bring it to me first? Kyle Brandt stood there. Sit down, Staff Sergeant. He sat. Talk. Ma'am, I can't be here. His voice was steady and dead. I ran a campaign against my commanding officer for 5 months. I aimed a good man at your spine, and I watched him do it, and I didn't stop it, and then I stood up in front of 800 people and screamed my dead brother's name at you while you had a knee on the man who raised him. He swallowed. There isn't a version of me on this base. There just isn't. Kyle. Ma'am, please don't. Kyle, what's in the boxes? Brandt froze. Ma'am, 3 boxes in your garage. Your wife thinks it's taxes. Emily leaned forward. What's in them? He couldn't speak for a second. Everything, he said. It's years, rosters, lists, citations, retirement notices, unit histories. Everything public that ever mentioned that community. I cross-referenced it by hand, ma'am. I don't have a system. I've got a legal pad. How many names, ma'am? How many names have you got in there, Emily said, of people who died in operations their families never got told about? Kyle Brandt sat very still. I don't know, he said. A lot. Guess. Ma'am, I don't. Guess Staff Sergeant. And Kyle Brandt said, 60 maybe, 60 something, that I'm confident on. Emily Carter sat back. 60 families, she said. Ma'am, I never contacted any of them. I swear to God. It was never about that. It was just about, his voice went, it was just about mine. I know, Emily said. That's why you're not separating. Brandt stared at her. Ma'am. Kyle, do you understand what you built? She said it quietly. You spent 6 years doing something nobody in this entire institution has the stomach to do, which is to sit down and count. You did it wrong. You did it alone at 2 a.m. in a garage with a legal pad, and it poisoned you, and it damn near destroyed a man you love. And you did it anyway because the alternative was accepting that a person can disappear, and nobody has to say a word about it. She leaned forward. That's not a sickness, Staff Sergeant. That's the correct instinct executed by a man with no help. There's a difference, and the difference is everything. Ma'am, that doesn't make it. Bishop's standing something up, Emily said. Brandt stopped. What? A family liaison function. On this base, attached to the joint program. She said it flatly. It's not going to be able to declassify anything. Let's be clear about that right now, because I will not lie to you, and I will not let you build a fantasy. Nobody's opening any doors. What it can do is make sure that when a man like Daniel Whitmore files a packet, there's a human being whose actual job is to sit with him while it comes back denied 4 times, and to say his kid's name out loud in a room with him. Kyle Brandt's hand started to shake. Ma'am, it's a nothing job, Emily said. There's no rank in it. There's no promotion in it. It's a desk and a phone, and it is the single worst job on this installation, and it will eat you alive. Ma'am, they'd never let me. Bishop asked for you by name. Brandt broke. Why? He got out. Ma'am, why would he? And Emily Carter said, because you're the only man in the Marine Corps who's already done it for 6 years for free. At 1300, Colonel Hal Vance called Ray Bishop for the last time. Ray? Hal, you want to tell me what the hell happened out there? Bishop leaned back in his chair. A scheduled training evolution, Hal. Ray, it's on the calendar. It's been on the calendar. There's no footage? No. 4 cameras and there's no footage. That's right. There was a long pause on the line and Bishop let it run, and he did not fill it, and that was new. Ray, I've got a general who won't take my calls, and a man in a suit who drove out to your base and drove back and wrote nothing down, and I've got a joint program that was supposed to be a headline, and instead it's got a waiting list. Vance's voice was strange. A waiting list, Ray. 211 names as of this morning. They're calling from Lejeune. They're calling from Coronado. There's a gunny at Pendleton who put in a request to transfer to a training billet. A gunny, voluntarily, to a school. Bishop said nothing. What did she do out there? And Ray Bishop said she let a man ask a question. That's it. Hal Bishop said, in 31 years, how many times has anybody let you ask one? The line was quiet for a long time. Ray, Vance said finally, about your retirement. I'm ready for it. Don't be. Vance's voice was rough. There's a conversation happening about extending you. 2 years, to stand the thing up properly. A pause. I told them you don't make waves. And Bishop, 62 years old with dried Virginia clay, still on his office floor, because he still would not let anybody clean it, said, Hal, tell them I lied about that. 14 months went by. That is the part nobody puts in the story because there is nothing in it. There is no mat and no hanger and no screaming. There is a man getting up at 04:30 on a Tuesday and then on another Tuesday and correcting a grip on a rope. And there is a woman doing the same, and there is a staff sergeant at a desk with a phone making calls that go nowhere, and then one that doesn't. There is a failure rate that goes from 41% to 19%. There is a syllabus with 2 names on it. There is a lieutenant who gets promoted and does not leave. There is a sergeant with 4 months to his 20 who takes an extension and who is seen on 11 separate occasions standing in a smoke pit outside Building 4, saying in a very quiet voice to a very young Marine, say that again. Say it to my face and see if you still like it. And there is a 23-year-old woman who is now a corporal who runs the rope traverse for every incoming class as the demonstration and who says the same 9 words every single time. And the 9 words are slow, ugly, correct. Let them watch. That's the whole thing. At the graduation of the 4th class, they gave Daniel Whitmore 3 minutes. He did not want them. He stood up at the end in front of 800 people with Emily Carter 4 feet to his left, and he had a card in his hand with words on it, and he put the card in his pocket without looking at it. I had something written, he said. It was good. My wife helped. Nobody laughed because nobody knew if they were allowed to. 14 months ago, I put my commanding officer's face in the mud on that field out there in front of 400 of you. He said it in a normal voice, the way you'd read a weather report and the entire building stopped functioning. Some of you were there. Most of you weren't because you were still in high school and somebody's told you about it by now, and whatever they told you, it was worse. He let that sit. I'm not going to explain it. There's no explanation. I've had 14 months and there's no explanation. There's just reasons, and reasons are what a man builds after the fact so he can go to sleep. He looked out at them. I'm telling you because in about a month, every one of you is going to be standing in front of somebody who scares you. Not with a rifle, scares you the other way. Somebody who's better than you and who came from somewhere you didn't and who's going to make you feel like the thing you built your whole life on might not have been the thing. The room was dead silent, and there's going to be about a second and a half where you get to decide what to do about that, Whitmore said. And I want you to know from a man who has been in that second and a half that it does not feel like a decision. It feels like weather. It feels like it's happening to you. His voice roughened. It isn't. It's you. It was always you. There's a second and a half, and it's the whole thing, and I got mine wrong, and I have paid for it every single day since, and I will pay for it until I'm in the ground. He stopped. That's it. That's all I've got. He started to sit down, and then he didn't. No, he said. One more. He turned and looked at Emily Carter. I spent 19 years believing that strength was proving you were right, Daniel Whitmore said. 19. And then a woman I'd never met put me on my back 3 times in 6 seconds and then sat down on the deck next to me in a suit of mud I put on her and told me my kid did it right. His voice went, and he did not fight it. He just let it go in front of 800 people. She didn't have to. There was no rule that made her. There was every rule saying don't. And she did it anyway, and it cost her, and she never mentioned it. Not once. Not to this day. He faced the room. Strength isn't proving you're right, he said. Strength is having the guts to say you were wrong before somebody makes you. I never had that. I've got about half of it now at 48, and I got the half I've got from her. He sat down. Nobody clapped for about 4 seconds. Then the whole building came apart, and it went on for a long time, and Emily Carter stood there with her hands behind her back and her chin up and nothing on her face because there were 800 people watching, and she had been doing this a long time. Only Aaron Reyes, who was standing close, saw her hand. It was shaking. Afterward, out on the road when it had emptied, Emily Carter walked out to the demonstration field alone. She stood at the spot. She knew the spot. It had rained the week before and the clay was soft again, and it took her boots the way it took everything. Ma'am, she did not turn around. Instructor. Whitmore came up and stood beside her. You know what I think about, he said. It's not the shove. Everybody thinks it's the shove. It isn't. He looked out at the field. It's the 4 hours after. You ran that whole evolution covered in it. 4 hours. And you never once wiped your face. I wiped my eyes. Ma'am, I did. Emily's mouth moved slightly. I needed to see. Whitmore laughed one broken syllable of it. 14 months, he said. That's the first joke you've ever made in front of me. I make about 1 a year, instructor. You're welcome. They stood there. Ma'am, can I ask you something? You've earned about 9. Why'd you really take this billet? Emily was quiet for a while. I told you, she said. I came to see where he learned it. That's not the whole thing. No, she said, it isn't. Whitmore waited. And Emily Carter said, for 6 years, I've been the only person who knew. Do you understand what that is? It's not guilt. Everybody wants it to be guilt because guilt has a shape, and you can get therapy for guilt. Her voice was very even. It's custody. I had custody of the last 11 minutes of a person's life, and there was nobody on earth I was allowed to hand it to. Not his mother, not his brother, Not you. 60-something people in this country are walking around with an empty space where a person used to be, and there's somebody like me for every one of them, sitting on the thing that fills it and not allowed to say a word. She turned and looked at him. I didn't come here to see where he learned it, instructor, she said. I came here to put it down. Daniel Whitmore stood there in the middle of a training field in Virginia and could not speak. And I couldn't, Emily said. For 16 days I stood on this base and I could not find the door. And then a man put me face down in the mud in front of 400 people. Whitmore's face came apart. Ma'am. And that's the thing I've never said out loud, and I'm only going to say it once, so listen. Emily Carter looked him dead in the eye. Daniel, you didn't ruin anything. You opened it. It was the worst thing you ever did, and it was the only thing that could have worked, and I have spent 14 months trying to make that make sense, and it doesn't, and it's still true. Whitmore put a hand over his eyes. That's not fair, he said. No, Emily said. It isn't. I asked a lieutenant for a refund on fare once. He didn't have it either. She looked back out at the field. You want to know the last thing I went to? Ma'am, I don't think I can take a last thing. Like it anyway. She said it gently, which from her was almost violence. When he asked me at minute 9, did I do it right? I've told you that part. Yes, ma'am. There was a minute at 10, Emily Carter said. Whitmore went absolutely still. Ma'am, he said one more thing, she said. And it's not in the packet because they took it out, because it's the kind of thing that gets taken out. And I've been carrying it for 7 years now, and I've never handed it to anybody because there was nobody to hand it to. Ma'am, Whitmore's voice was a whisper. Please. And Emily Carter said, he said, tell Whitmore I didn't lift my hips. Daniel Whitmore stood there for about 2 seconds. And then on a training field in Virginia, in front of nobody, a 48-year-old Marine went down on his knees in the mud for the second time in 14 months, and this time he was not alone in it because Emily Carter went down with him and put one hand flat between his shoulder blades and left it there on the exact spot where hers had been. They stayed like that a while. He was 23, Whitmore said. Yes. Ma'am, he was a kid. He was a stupid kid. He was the funniest human being I ever met in my life. He stopped. He used to hide my keys. 19 years one man ever had the guts to hide my keys. I know, Emily said. He told me. What? Minute 6, she said. He was scared and he was talking and people talk about what they love. Her hand did not move. He told me about the keys. And Daniel Whitmore made a sound that was not grief exactly and was not relief either. And there is no word for it in English because English was built by people who were never given back 11 minutes. At Camp Blackridge, they still tell it wrong. They tell it as a fight. They tell it at 3 seconds and 4 seconds and 6 seconds and a man on his back 3 times in front of 800 people. And every year the numbers get better and every year somebody's grandson tells it faster. Emily Carter never corrected it. Not once, not in the 11 years she stayed, not when they retired her, not at the ceremony and where 400 people stood up and she told them to sit down and they didn't. But she said one thing about it once to a room full of lieutenants at the request of a corporal turned captain named Jessica Miller, who had asked her to come and had been told no 4 times before she got a yes. A lieutenant in the back had raised his hand and asked the question they always asked, which was how she beat him. And Emily Carter said, son, we never beat him. Beating him took 6 seconds, and it was the least important thing that happened at that base in 11 years. Then what was ma'am? And she said, he asked me a question, and I answered it. She picked up her cover. You're going to spend your whole career being told that strength is the thing you do with your hands. It isn't. Anybody can put a man on the ground. It takes 4 minutes and no talent at all. She looked at them, 40 faces, none of them older than 26. The rare thing, gentlemen, the thing almost nobody on this earth can do is to stand there while somebody hurts you and understand exactly why he's doing it and then hand him back the only thing that could ever make him stop. She went to the door. They'll tell you you never attack a Navy SEAL because you don't know what she's survived, Emily Carter said. That's not the lesson. That's a bumper sticker. She put her cover on. The lesson is that every man who ever swung at me was already losing to something else. Every one. Find out what it is. That's the goal. That's the whole job. And then Commander Emily Carter walked out, and she never told that story again, and she